Today we're going to be covering the storyline of Did Daredevil Kill a Man? Now, did he or did he not is the entire plot to this one. This is 36 issues, it's written by Chip Zdarsky. It is technically the lead into Devil's Reign, and then there's a finale, but these 36 issues are standalone, so we're going to bring that to you today. I hope you guys enjoy.
A woman sits at the bar, sipping her drink. Seat taken? Matt asks as he sits down, and they talk briefly about the party in the club. They talk about everyone celebrating getting out of going to prison, about how the only witness seems to have taken a bullet. Shocking. Would you mind telling me what time it is? Matt tells her, and she looks at him in surprise, asking if he's blind. Her eyes then widen as she starts to apologize when she realizes that he is in fact blind, but he waves her off. It's okay. I make it hard for people to notice. He reaches into his pocket, pulling out some pain meds to wash down with his whiskey, and the woman smiles at him, asking if she can have one, but he shakes his head, looking at her. Sorry, that would be illegal. They both go late into the night, with the beautiful woman apologizing as she quickly gets up and gets dressed, making an excuse about how she needs to get to work early. If you give me your number, I'll probably text or call you? Looking at Matt as he simply stares at the window, seeing but not seeing. You don't want to get mixed up with the likes of me, he promises her, but she just gets up and smiles at him, telling him that she really likes him. That she likes the fact that she doesn't have to worry about if she's pretty enough. That she managed to pick him up with her charm alone. The next day, the NYPD are picking up a perp who's robbing a store. The ambulance carts him off, and with the man heavily bandaged, one of the rookies walks over with the perp's statement, pointing out that the man was stating that Daredevil is the one who beat him up. The detective in charge just waves her off though, telling her that it would be smart for her to pretend that she didn't hear that. Nobody catches these guys, you just have to learn to live with it. I don't care that the mystery of the man's broken leg will go unsolved, the detective says, but he stops talking as he looks up to see a new detective arriving. The man is massive as he stalks forward. Do we know who did this? He asks the rookie grimly, and she stammers that the victim didn't have a visual. So the detective stalks past her, walking to the ambulance, pounding on the side of it to get the man's attention. Who did this to you? Daredevil! The perp shouts, and the detective moves back to the officers as he informs the officers that they need to report that Daredevil did this. Taylor looks back, shouting at him, demanding to know who is he. Detective Cole North. I was just transferred from Chicago, but I know you, Detective Taylor. 18 years with no major busts. But you like vacations, Cole says, glaring at him, and Taylor glares back for a moment but finally decides to back down. Afterwards, Officer Deacon tries to apologize, but Cole waves her off, telling her that they can't ignore what a vigilante did. That he didn't do this because he had to, he didn't do it because he needed to. It's because he liked to beat the man up. Later that night, Matt slides out of bed. He should still be healing from his accident, but he feels trapped inside of his apartment. So he heads out into the night, moving across the city as Daredevil. He can feel it in the kitchen. The criminals have gotten used to the devil being gone. But he keeps moving. He doesn't try to hide. He wants to be seen. He wants them to know that the Daredevil is back. He wants them to tell others. He leaps onto another building, almost slipping on the ledge. He still isn't fully healed. He should be taking it easy, but he pauses because he can hear it. He can feel it. A robbery 3 blocks away. He ignores his body and he begins to move. The devil has slipped their mind. These guys are robbing a liquor store, and one of the guys hisses at his friend to hurry up. Just grab a few more bottles to celebrate, man, the guy says as he grabs stuff off the top shelf, and they head outside looking to make sure the coast is clear. But then they both stop, taking sharp breaths as they look up to see Daredevil leaping down towards them. I'm not gonna lie, I've missed this, Matt thinks to himself, and he hits the first with a kick, but as he twists to attack the second, he can sense it. The gunfire from their getaway van hits the store window as Daredevil pushes the second guy out of the way. He twists again, throwing his stick, knocking the gun out of the third guy's hand. He's shocked as he takes a swing, cracking Daredevil in the jaw, and the 3 begin to rush at him. Matt twists, elbowing one in the face, unaware that he has stumbled back, cracking his head against the concrete wall. He tries to knock the gun out of the other hand, but a bottle is smashed over his head. More blows begin to rain down upon him, kicking and punching. They stomp on him as he falls to the ground. He blocks, rolling out, kicking the thug's legs out from underneath him. He struggles to his feet, with the thugs down. But there's a fire in the liquor store behind him. He stumbles away, clutching his wounded body. He should fight the fire, but he can hear the sirens quickly approaching. He knows that Mayor Fisk has ordered the police to arrest vigilantes on sight. He can't stay. He leaps away as the cops arrive, the building already blazing. He sits on the rooftop nearby, trying to catch his breath as he thinks about how he fought the likes of Ultron and the Hand, but he was almost put down to the ground by 3 robbers. Pulls his mask off, his mind racing. Elsewhere in the city, Mayor Fisk clicks on the news, his face breaking into a smile as he hears the reports of the fire. He hears how the robbers had an altercation with the vigilante known as Daredevil, about how 2 of the robbers had been apprehended, but the third, Leo Carrero, he died from head trauma, the reporter states, making Fisk smile broader, because Daredevil just murdered a man. At his home, Matt sleeps, his body wounded. His sheets were stained with blood, unaware that his world has just changed. It doesn't take him long to hear the news. It happened fast. The cops worked the crime scene, and then the robbers arrived at the hospital, and that's when he was declared dead 30 minutes later. It was ruled as a homicide, and Daredevil was declared a murderer. Foggy works quickly, trying to get a hold of Matt to try and get ahead of the problem. Matt, it's me again. I know you're avoiding me, he begins to state when the phone goes straight to voicemail, but Matt speaks to him from the shadows. Foggy, making his friend jump. I came to tell you that I'm fine, Matt tells him, and Foggy begins to rattle off questions trying to figure out what happened. He's dead, it's true, but I didn't do it. I didn't kill him. Someone is setting me up, he tells his friend. Foggy pauses, not sure what Matt is trying to say as he asks more questions. I didn't do it, Foggy, he shouts as he slams his fist on the table. He turns back to the window, telling Foggy that it must have been Fisk trying to set him up. Foggy tries to talk some sense into him, telling him to turn himself in, but that they'll fight so that he can keep his mask. No, I won't do it, Matt tells him, also refusing to lay low because it'll make him look guilty. The costume stays on. People need to see me. I'm Daredevil. With that, he leaps out the window. It doesn't take him long to find the hospital and the doctor that declared Leo Carrero dead. He waits for him to come outside before springing on him in the alleyway. What did you do? He demands angrily, grabbing the doctor by the shirt, slamming him into the wall. Tell me what happened! He snaps. The doctor is scared. He tells Daredevil that he came in with a head injury at the base of his skull. Their scans found a blood clot and they rushed him into surgery, but it was too late. Daredevil listens to the doctor speak, listening for the telltale skip of his heart that would mean that he is lying, but it doesn't come. He steps back in shock. He releases the man and he turns to go without a word, but the doctor stops him. He tells him that he's worked on Daredevil's victims before, that he's seen the level of precision that Daredevil has when dealing with criminals. This isn't one of those times. That man was going to die no matter what we did. You screwed up. Somebody's dead. You need to stop the violence. There are other ways, the doctor tries to tell him, but Daredevil turns, launching his grappling hook, leaping into the night sky. With your abilities, you should have been a doctor, the doctor whispers. Meanwhile, Detective Cole and his partner, Fred Higgins, find themselves outside of Mayor Fisk's office. They move past the secretary, ignoring their protests as they push open the doors and step inside. Ah, earlier than expected. Please, come in, officers, Fisk says with a smile from behind his desk. Cole pushes past the pleasantries, reminding Fisk that Daredevil is a suspect in the case that they are dealing with. Yes, quite the tragedy. I assume that you're here due to my alleged history with the Daredevil. Fisk asks him. He stands up, reminding them that he believes in law and order, that he has heard that the devil is scouring the streets for whoever set him up. You're here to warn me, to see if I've been visited by the devil in the night, Fisk asks as he stands before them, but Fisk tells them that he hasn't, and that he knows that Cole has only come here because he's curious about the Kingpin, that he had to meet the man since he came all the way from Chicago. But Fisk puts his hand on Cole's shoulder, leaning in. Leaving your life behind, your friends. Poor Anna. If that's everything, gentlemen, I have a city to run, he says as he finally turns and walks back to his desk. After the police leave, Wesley closes the door and crosses back across the room, finally asking Fisk if he did have anything to do with setting Daredevil up. Fisk stares out the window, smiling. If I had anything to do with this, I would be bursting to tell you. But sadly, it wasn't me. It appears that the Daredevil has finally done himself in. Fisk tells his assistant. What he doesn't realize is that Daredevil is standing on a nearby rooftop, listening to everything that the Kingpin is saying. He listens for the telltale skips of his heartbeat, something that would tell Daredevil that he's lying and they actually set him up, but there's nothing. And he sits on the rooftop, thinking hard. Matt later walks into his church, looking for Father Simon, the man who has helped him with spiritual guidance throughout the years. He knows that he is Daredevil, but he doesn't find the father, and instead, he finds Sister Elizabeth. He sits in one of the pews, quietly asking for her advice with this test that God seems to have given him. He tells her that he's done something unforgivable, but he only wanted to help people. Well then, help people, she tells him simply. So he does. He comes out of the shadows to stop two muggers. He knows just how much pressure to put onto the man's windpipe to stop him. He knows just where to kick the man in the solar plexus so that he doesn't rupture his liver. He drops them both in seconds. When I was younger, I made mistakes. But now, I would never kill someone, he tells himself, proud of his precision. But the two people he saved just look at him in fear, and he turns away, moving back through the shadows as he spends the rest of the day stopping crimes, sensing the fear of the criminals and the victims in his city. He finally takes a break on a rooftop water tower, wondering whether his friends will believe him, wondering whether the criminals will fear him more or band together to stop him. If it wasn't Fisk, who set me up, he wonders, as he heads back to the original crime scene, trying to use his advanced senses to find something that he missed. But the crime scene is a mess, and that's when he stops because he hears voices behind him. Detective Cole and Higgins are walking towards him. I was too distracted, Matt thinks to himself as Higgins pulls his service weapon. Freeze! Don't even think about moving! But Daredevil moves fast, throwing his billy club, hitting the man in the shoulder, his gun firing into the air as he falls back in pain. Cole rushes at Daredevil, but Daredevil kicks out, catching him in the stomach. He whirls around, prepared to fire his grappling hook, as Cole pulls out his pistol, firing. The round hits Daredevil in the shoulder, and he falls to the ground. Cole stands up, standing over him as he pulls out his radio. The suspect known as Daredevil has been shot, he calls into the precinct. Mayor Fisk, meanwhile, is finishing his speech at a fundraiser, stepping off the stage to find Wesley, who informs him that the police reports have indicated that Daredevil has been shot and is in police custody. I thought you'd like to know immediately, Wesley whispers to the mayor. Fisk agrees, ordering him to call the car, that he would like to go to the scene. Daredevil comes to, hearing Cole standing over him with the pistol, shouting to his partner, "Get up, Higgins! I called it in!" He shouts, pulling out his handcuffs, moving to cuff Daredevil. Let's wrap this up. But Daredevil can sense movement. He rolls fast, kicking out, knocking the weapon from Cole's hand. He then keeps rolling, kicking the man in the stomach, forcing him to his feet. He begins to move off, hearing Higgins run behind him. Freeze! The detective shouts before finally opening fire, but Daredevil moves fast, ducking into a nearby alleyway. He keeps moving, knowing that the bullet is lodged in his shoulder, that he won't be able to escape to the rooftops. So he continues to run through the alleyway, blood oozing out of his wound. He has no choice as he heads into the thrift clothing store. Damn it, I hate it when Foggy's right, he thinks to himself, and Cole finally gets to his feet, quickly following after Daredevil, ignoring his partner's calls. He moves through the alleyway, finding his way out into the street, and he looks through the crowd of people, his eyes finally stopping on a red-haired man with bright red boots. He reaches for his radio, whispering that the officers need to look for a guy with red boots. But he doesn't know that Matt can hear him, and Matt begins to run, pulling his mask out of his pocket, pulling it down on his head. He runs fast, jumping over the hood of a police car that screeches to a halt, but it's over. He's surrounded. The NYPD is all over him. Officer Bieliski, how's your partner? He calls out, and the officer pauses before stating that the doctors state that he'll make a full recovery. Daredevil nods his head. And you, Sergeant Thompson, how's the Williams family? He asks another. She nods her head, stating that they told her to thank him. Unbelievable! Cole hisses at the other cops in disgust as he steps forward, shouting at them, You're officers of the law! You need to do your jobs! Somebody give me a gun so that I can do my job and arrest him! He starts to state, but he turns as all of the police officers raise their weapons. Daredevil stands before him, his gun in his hand. He throws it to the ground and drops into a boxing stance, waiting. Cole rushes at him, the two going back and forth. Cole is also a boxer, and he feints a blow, punching Daredevil hard in the face. A couple of body blows leave Daredevil stunned, and Cole rushes into him, slamming into him hard, throwing him into the hood of a police car. He punches him again and again, his fist slamming into his face. He finally rolls Daredevil over, putting on the handcuffs. Do me a favor, stay down, he hisses at him. Daredevil can sense them all. Everyone is around him. They're all watching him lose. Everyone is seeing the fool in the costume who's now under arrest for the murder of a man. Cole drags him to his feet, reading him his rights, and he reaches for his mask, beginning to pull it off. But one of the officers stops him. I don't know who the hell you are, but you are definitely not from New York. This man has done good for this city, for other cops. He's a policeman as far as I'm concerned, and we look out for our own. I know you gotta take him in, I get that, he broke the law. We don't perp walk cops. The officer tells him, ignoring how big, angry, and scary Cole is. The other officers lead Daredevil to the police cruiser, broken, and defeat him. Let him keep the mask on until we get to the station. The officer tells Cole. He sighs, shaking his head. Fine, I don't care. You New York boys need to get your heads checked. Inside of the cruiser, Matt hangs his head in shame. He's done. He's defeated. He's through. But that's when the heavy rounds begin to rip through the police barricade. The cops moving fast, drawing their guns, trying to get to cover. Daredevil looks out the window, trying to figure out what is happening. Who is shooting up the NYPD? Smoke grenades drop from the rooftop, surrounding the cruiser that Daredevil is kept in. Cole glances from behind his cover, finally aware of what's going on. It's a breakout! He shouts as he dashes across the area. That's when he finds Daredevil trying to crawl away, blood oozing from his wounds. He grabs the vigilante, rolling him over. You set us up! Who's attacking us? Cole demands, but Daredevil shakes his head. Don't! He says weakly, a large arm circling around Cole's throat, beginning to choke him out. He drops to the ground unconscious, and Daredevil falls, blacking out. He finally comes to, strapped to a gurney. Congrats, you'll live, a familiar voice tells him. But even better than that, you've seen the light. You've seen it my way. Frank Castle, the Punisher, says as he steps forward. Matt was coming out of it again. You could hear that familiar heartbeat, steady, unflinching. The heart of a psychopath. There was another one. Scared. Different. Matt finally opened up his eyes, and his senses told him that Frank was nearby. Well, welcome back, pal, Frank says, smiling down at Daredevil. Gotta admit, been feeling like a bit of a stalker lately. Been following you, Red. Like what I've been noticing. The freak with the code finally seeing the light, he says as he reaches down, tightening the straps on Daredevil's gurney. Doing what needs to be done. You take a swing at the devil, you don't get back up. Though, killing a liquor store robber is a little much, even for me. But Daredevil is shaking his head. Frank, you psycho, I didn't. He struggles to argue, but Frank is across the room looking at the thug that he has tied up to a chair. Sure you did. Give me a sec, pal, gotta tend to something. He asks the goon where the Owl's drug operation is based out of, hitting him hard across the face, not believing his answer. But Matt can sense the man is telling the truth. The two things I hate in my home are liars and phonies, Frank says, turning back to Matt. He looks at the devil, pointing out that he's been a phony ever since the day that they met, pretending that he cares about the victims, but just letting the scum live long enough to make more victims. Daredevil's listening, but he continues to struggle at his restraints. So am I right, Red? Are you done being a phony? You're a psychopath, Frank, Matt says, trying to keep Frank talking as he continues to attempt to free himself. Justifying murder? It's all you've ever done. A man who thinks he's above the law, Daredevil tells him, but Frank shakes his head, pulling out a pistol, pointing it at Daredevil. He asks Daredevil why doesn't he just put a bullet in this man now, prevent him from going back out there. You're gonna tell me what, he's the next Tony Stark? He's gonna turn his life around? Frank asks, turning back to Matt, but Matt shakes his head. He doesn't know the man. He doesn't know what he's been through, but points out that lives are complicated. And Frank scoffs. Not so complicated that you won't break his nose or bust up some ribs, huh, Red? If I let this guy go, he's gonna kill someone. He pushes the gun against the man's head. So are you ready to stop it? Do I let him go? Do I let him kill again and again, Daredevil? Or do I end this now? Daredevil pauses. Frank, he has people who love him. Everyone does. Let him go. Fine, Frank says, cutting the man free and turning away. Not sure where he's going to go in these tunnels, but the thug stops, seeing a rifle that Frank has left by, and he goes for it. He raises the weapon, preparing to fire, but a pistol shot echoes in the room, and Frank's round has entered the man's skull. No! Daredevil screams. That's better, Red. Find a guy that's gonna put up a fight and kill him in self-defense, huh? Daredevil begins to struggle against his bonds, finally ripping them free and charging at Frank. For the last time, I didn't kill him! He bellows, whirling around, knocking the pistol out of Frank's hand, but the Punisher kicks him in the stomach, sending him flying through a desk. I really hoped you changed, Red. I know you're a killer. I see the glee when you fight. And he points out that he's a math guy, because Frank's math says that if he takes out one bad guy, more good guys get to live. Matt reaches for another rifle that has fallen nearby, making sure it's loaded. I bank on you not stopping me, on you growing up and finally doing what is necessary. Frank shouts, raising his own rifle, taking aim, but Daredevil fires around the corner, the round hitting Frank in his Kevlar. The force knocks him down, sending him into a wall. Still going for Kevlar shots. I think deep down you want me out there, doing what I do. Daredevil leaps out from behind the desk, firing 2 pistols as he dives through the air, the rounds ricocheting and knocking Frank's pistols away, stunning him and grazing off his shoulder, leg, and neck. Frank grunts, reaching for the wounds, trying to stop the bleeding as Daredevil steps before him, raising both pistols, aiming it at his head. Frank, do you have any idea the level of carnage I could unleash with a gun in my hand? It's no contest. You're amateur hour, Punisher. Matt can sense the explosives nearby and he turns the weapons. You're a demon, sure, but I'm the devil. He hisses as the guns go off, the explosions ripping through the room, stunning Matt's hearing for a moment. Frank tries to move to fight back, but Daredevil hits him hard, chopping his throat, throwing him into a wall. I'm not a murderer, because if I was, you'd be dead, he says as he stands over Frank. Frank's smiling. It'd be worth it, knowing you became better than me. Frank hits him one last time, knocking him out, and then he picks him up, dragging him out of the lair, away from the fires. He will never become Frank Hassel. It's his biggest fear. So much so that he knows that he's been denying the facts. He dumps Frank on the ground and falls to his knees. I killed a man. He finally admits to himself, pulling off his mask, staring into the void. He has to be better. He has to prove himself. He reaches into his pocket, pulling out one of the pain meds, throwing it into his mouth. I have a job to do. The only thing that matters. Meanwhile, at his apartment, Detective North steps out of the shower with his phone ringing. He picks it up to hear Mayor Fisk's voice, who praises him for his attempted apprehension of Daredevil. The mayor promises that he will face no ill consequences for his actions. But North stops listening, hanging up the phone, sitting alone in the darkness of his apartment. Outside of a diner, 2 cops step out to find Frank Castle on the hood of their cruiser. They turn, looking for the source of the deposit, and they look down a nearby alleyway to see Daredevil limping away wearing a Punisher t-shirt. One begins to raise his weapon, but the other stops him, shaking his head. Daredevil thinks to himself, time to go to work. Meanwhile, the Owl sits comfortably going over his paperwork while his lieutenant gives him updates on the operations. He looks up briefly at his security cameras, shocked to see a familiar horned vigilante standing at the entryway. It's him, at the front door! Kill that buffoon and get the drugs out of here! He shouts as he jumps out of his seat. The lieutenants rush downstairs, ordering the men to load up the vans and prepare to move. They head to the door, throwing it open, preparing to fight the Daredevil, but there's no one there as one of them pulls out his pistol. He steps cautiously outside, but they don't see Daredevil over by the door, and he leaps down, landing on the guy's back. Daredevil will never die, Matt thinks to himself, leaping into the room, immediately fighting against the Owl's thugs. He throws kicks and punches, knocking them away, grabbing a pistol from one's hand, using it as a throwing device, knocking the weapon out of another. But a heavily armored thug rushes forward, his fist slamming into Daredevil's face, knocking him down. The Owl's going pro, hiring enhanced goons. Daredevil thinks to himself as he struggles up, feeling the last several days' worth of beatings. Heard a lot about you, toughest guy in the city. But from where I'm standing, you're nothing. The goon smirks as he reaches down, grabbing Daredevil by the throat. But he doesn't see the hero grab a chain and hook, or him hooking it onto the back of the man's armor. Well then, you need a fresh perspective, Daredevil tells him with a bloody smirk, the drug van suddenly taking off, dragging the armored thug with it. Daredevil grabs hold, riding him as the van heads out into the streets, reaching down, pulling the thug's pistol off of his hip, carefully taking aim. The gun thunders in his hand, hitting one of the van's tires, forcing it to swerve, flipping through the air. Well, that's over. Daredevil thinks to himself as he struggles up, but then he turns his head, sensing that he was wrong as the rest of Owl's goons are catching up with him. He grabs one of the van's doors, using it like a shield as the goons open fire, and he leaps among them, using the door as a weapon as he takes down the whole mob. But there's just too many. One stabbing him in the side as they all begin to hammer into him, raining blows down on his head. He's about to fall, but suddenly, he's not alone. Thank God. My friends. He thinks as Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage launch themselves into the fight, Daredevil struggling away, slumping against a car. They know I'm a murderer. Take me in. He suddenly realizes, but then it all goes black. He sits upright quickly, shocked to find himself lying on a couch. Whoa, man. I just patched you up with some very expensive Kunlun medical bandages. Please don't unpatch yourself just yet, Danny tells him as he pushes him back to the couch. Daredevil sits up, looking over at Luke and Jessica standing nearby. What were you thinking? Going in there alone? What the hell is going on with you, man? Luke asks, but Matt shakes his head, telling his friends that he knows why they're here. He tells them that he knows that he's been erratic. He wanted to show them that he could still be a hero, and he admits to them that he killed that man. I wanted to do one last good thing as Daredevil. Before you guys took me out, I'm glad it was you guys. I'm glad friends are here to arrest me. But the others just look at each other. Look, Red, we're not here to take you in. We're just worried about you. Fighting with cops, your Punisher cosplay? Jessica asks, and Matt is shocked, surprised that they know about his fight with the Punisher, but Danny points out that he's wearing a Punisher shirt. I never noticed. I needed a shirt. Matt whispers as he looks down at his shirt in shock, and Luke stands up, giving his friend a pep talk. He understands that Matt is in rough shape, but tries to explain what happened was an accident. That it's happened to all of them at some point, that they've accidentally killed somebody at some point. What? Matt says in shock as Jessica agrees. It happens. You deal with it and you move on. She explains to him. Matt stands up, disbelief on his face. My God, we're all murderers. He whispers, still in shock as his friends try to help him. Danny tries to calm him down, but Matt finally agrees, asking him which way is the washroom so that he can clean up. It only takes a few minutes before Luke Cage walks down the hallway, kicking in the door, finding Matt has slipped out the window. He finds his way home, pulls his broken body up the fire escape when he slips in through his window. He pulls off his Punisher shirt, throwing it on the ground in disgust as he pours himself a whiskey and pulls out his pain meds. His mind is still reeling. He doesn't know what to do as he sits in the darkness. He needs time to heal. He needs time to meditate. But then what? He thinks to himself, and that's when he senses that someone is in his home, someone unnaturally quiet, someone who is pure power and doesn't know it. The best of us. Daredevil thinks to himself, Daredevil, Spider-Man says quietly from the corner of the room as he walks forward. I followed you home. Normally, I'd never be able to follow you, but you're obviously not yourself, he says as he looks at the bottle of whiskey and pills. Daredevil stands, still not feeling himself. You shouldn't be. He begins, but Spider-Man stomps him. Don't worry, I didn't look at your mail, I didn't snoop. I don't know who you are, but I'm not talking about your identity. He tells him that he understands what happened, that he's been there. He's had to do some soul searching afterwards. But what you did afterwards, terrorize your neighborhood, fist fight with cops, your latest sloppy fight where our buddies had to save your butt, you're a mess. You're in trouble and on a suicide mission, and I'm here to tell you, you're done. Spider-Man tells him, and he explains that they all know that there will come a day when they can't do this job anymore. I'd hoped someone would step up and tell me when my day comes, and right now, it's your day. It's over. You need to stop. Matt looks at him for a moment before nodding, pulling off the mask. You're right. I know you're right. I can't do this anymore. He looks down at the mask for a moment before tossing it to Spider-Man. The wall crawler turns and walks away, leaping out the skylight, leaving Matt Murdock alone in the darkness, tears flowing down his face. The sun peeks over the edges of the buildings, bringing another new day to New York City. Janet leans against the wall with her coffee, not sure why they need to open up the watch shop so early, and Marcus keeps fiddling with the key, once again explaining the reason, but she interrupts him, pointing across the street where some thugs are breaking into Kaplan's party store. The thug smiles at her as a cop car zooms past, giving no attention to those breaking the law. She wants to do something, but Marcus reminds her that they've already tried to help Kaplan pay the owl for his protection last month. We have to pay for our own protection, he sighs as he finally opens the door, heading inside, leaving the corruption of the city behind for a moment. The cops are useless, and Daredevil is dead. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Cole North still can't help thinking about Daredevil as he doodles on a piece of paper. Higgins interrupts his thoughts, telling him that the captain wants to see him, and he reaches for the doodle, shaking his head. Oh my God, pal, are you... Higgins begins, but Cole interrupts him as he stands and heads for the captain's office, passing two of the detectives who both glare at him. Captain, I'm gonna give you some new orders. Maybe get you to arrest some firefighters this time? They grumble under their breath, but Cole doesn't even bother looking at them. Detective Elias, Detective Henry, he says simply and keeps walking right into the captain's office, sitting in front of her desk as she goes over that he was highly recommended from Chicago. And yet you appear to me as useless as an abstinence talk at my old summer camp, she says, pointing out that he's been at the precinct for months, and he's only had a fist fight with Daredevil to show for it. She points out that Mayor Fisk isn't happy about the vigilantes. None of the detectives want to arrest those that help them do their jobs either. Go figure, she sighs, and puts down a file asking how North's case against Spider-Man is working out. It's been slower moving forward due to the amount of area that he covers, plus his speed. I think going after Frank Castle makes more. He begins to tell her, but she holds up her hand, telling him to leave her office. As he enters into the main precinct, he receives nothing but glares from the fellow officers. Meanwhile, Matt Murdock is walking through his neighborhood, finally having given up his life as Daredevil and seemingly enjoying it. Elsewhere, Wilson Fisk is fighting off a group of criminals, one trying to jump on his back, but he grabs the man by the head, flipping him over and whirling on another, the man holding a brick in his hands. I said no weapons, Fisk hisses as he rushes forward, grabbing the man by the throat. He begins to squeeze the very life out of this man's body, images of Daredevil flooding in his mind, but a voice stays his hand. Sir, I'm afraid the deal with the warden was to bring the prisoners back alive, Wesley reminds him. The words bring Fisk out of his rage as he drops the prisoner to the ground, apologizing to Wesley for his actions. My mind was elsewhere, he explains, and Matt continues to walk through the city on his way to work, deciding to step into a nearby used bookstore. Excuse me, do you work here? He asks the cute woman who's putting books back on the shelf, and she comes down, and Matt notes that she doesn't even pause when she realizes that he's blind. A refreshing take. He smiles at her, asking if she has an early edition of Bleak House. While the woman is explaining that she doesn't, she explains that she can find him one. He continues to smile, noting that with his heightened senses, he realizes that she isn't attracted to him in the least bit. After she agrees to find the book, he hands her his card. Wait, Murdock? Weren't you the mayor? For a heartbeat, he says with a smile, and she introduces herself, explaining that her husband's family owns the shop and that he should just keep being the mayor. You've got that faux charm down pat, she says, and they wave goodbye and Matt continues to work. Meanwhile, Cole continues to pore over the files on Spider-Man before finally calling it a night. He says goodbye to his partner, heading out the door, not seeing the two detectives that have begun to follow him into the night. Elsewhere, Mayor Fisk continues to shower off as Wesley reads him tomorrow's schedule, but Wilson interrupts, pointing out that Wesley stopped him today, stopped him from making a big mistake that would have caused issues for his work as mayor. If you had done that a year ago, I would have killed that man and then you, he says. He steps out of the shower, putting a towel around himself, ordering Wesley to call the families together. I require an audience. Meanwhile, Matt Murdock finally arrives late for his shift as a parole officer, thanking the officers working for getting his case files done in Braille. He walks into the first meeting, introducing himself to his client and beginning to read off the list of rules and what is required of him. I want to stress the no drugs or alcohol stipulation. The man nods, explaining that he's clean and that he's been doing the drug tests. Matt pauses for a moment before standing and walking around the table, getting close to his client, leaning against the edge. You've been drinking beer, a bit of rum, but more concerning is that you reek of crack cocaine. And you either peed yourself or you have a bag of urine for the drug test. He ignores the shocked look on his client's face and he keeps talking, explaining to his client that he has one goal, to keep him out of jail and help him get out of the system. I'm trying to keep you out of prison. The system is broken, but it is the system. Let's get you out. Deal? Matt says, holding out his hand to shake. Meanwhile, Cole has realized that he has a tail and he knows that they are cops. He knows that they plan on jumping him on his way home, and he leads them through the park instead, managing to give them the slip as he hides behind some trees. But there are more. They jump him from behind, all cops not bothering to hide their faces. They hit Cole hard. He tries to block, protect his head, but they're over him, raining blows on his body when suddenly there's a gunshot and the cops go down, rounds ripping into their bodies. Cole tries to look up. His vision is hazy, but he sees a smiling face leaning over him, and the man tells him, "Thanks from the owl for getting rid of Daredevil." The next morning, Janet walks into Kaplan's party store, smiling at Kaplan, asking where he keeps his balloons. She needs them for Marcus's birthday. 2 aisles over, on the house for the help you guys gave me last month, he tells her as he continues to stock the shelves. She heads towards the aisle, but hears the door open again. Kaplan begins to plead for more time. Mr. Owlsy thinks we're being a little too soft on you on account of you being a source of joy. The thugs laugh as Janet peers around the shelves. She sees them grabbing Kaplan. She doesn't know what to do, but her hands reach out and find a metal bar. She breathes deep, trying to decide, but she turns, her eyes widening as she looks up an aisle of superhero costumes and masks, and the Daredevil costume stares down at her, beckoning her. Meanwhile, Detective North sits up in his hospital bed, staring angrily ahead as he recounts the events of the previous night to the detectives in his room. I heard Detective Tyler survived a shooting. When he's up and about, I expect him to be arrested for assaulting an officer. I don't believe that it was attempted murder, he says finally, and the detectives try to talk him out of it, but he shakes his head. Do the job, detective. No matter what, do the job, he says quietly. Meanwhile, members of Fisk's security team greet Owlsy as he walks through the door of the empty bank, and they lead him back to the vault where he's surprised to find the other heads of the crime families all waiting. Sit, Fisk orders him as he puts his massive hand on the man's shoulder. With everyone finally gathered, he calms their fears about a potential hit, and he explains that he has come to realize that he no longer has the drive for the criminal life. As mayor, he became content. The criminal empires are running smoother than they ever have before, with most of the families respecting each other's territories. His position as mayor has helped them all. Because of this, he's planning on stepping back, dividing his men and his holdings amongst the other families, as long as they continue to observe the peace and pay him his percentages. The city is mine, but the city beneath the city is yours. Conduct yourselves accordingly, he says as he turns and walks out of the vault. Meanwhile, Matt Murdock and Foggy sit at a small bistro enjoying their morning coffee as Foggy looks at the paper. He asks if the supposed Daredevil sightings are Matt's doing. Matt leans forward, holding his hand as he whispers to Foggy. Whoa. Just because I'm retired doesn't mean you can shout in public about my old job. And he leans back. And second, that's not me. It's either a copycat or just wishful thinking by the papers, he says as he reaches for his briefcase. He pulls out Foggy's birthday present, smiling as his friend opens it to find a first edition Bleak House. Thanks, man. Where'd you get it? Foggy asks in wonder, and Matt smiles as he thinks of the woman at the store, Mindy. He tells Foggy that he just got it from a local bookstore. Finally, he stands, pulling out his cane, apologizing to Foggy and explaining that he's going to be late for work, and it doesn't take long for Matt to reach his offices, where he accepts the files for his first appointment. He greets Joey as he steps into the office, sitting down, explaining that he just wants to catch up on the case. It seems like you had 2 job interviews. How'd they go? Matt asks, but Joey quickly explains that they went badly, and he desperately needs money to quickly help his mother. He explains that that's why he got caught in the first place. He had to step up selling drugs since his brother died. Stupid. I thought he was done with that. But he pulled some small-time robbery with a buddy and Daredevil killed him. Getting sad for a moment, he keeps talking, but Matt can only hear the blood rushing through his body. He stumbles to his feet with Joey asking if everything's okay, and Matt tells him that he just needs to step outside for a moment. He closes the office door, leaning against the wall, loosening his tie as he begins to breathe heavy, his heart pounding in his chest as he realizes that he did this to Joey and his family. It's later that night that Sister Elizabeth finds Matt sitting on the steps outside of the church. She goes to him, asking if there's anything that she can do to help. He tells her that he was just confronted by the consequences of his own sins, and that he never really stopped and faced what his actions have brought. That he's realized that he's possibly using his religion to justify the violence in his life, that he doesn't think that he deserves God's forgiveness anymore. But Sister Elizabeth puts her hand on his shoulder, explaining that he isn't special, that many people have felt this way throughout history, that his self-loathing doesn't exclude him from God's love. Later that night, 2 women are walking down the street when they're suddenly jumped by 2 robbers. But somebody comes across the street in the dark, leaping into the fight, helping the struggling women. Someone in a Daredevil mask. Somebody grabs this Daredevil from behind and they slam them against the wall, punching them in the face. And the fight only takes a few seconds, but everyone is left gasping and unconscious on the ground. In his apartment, Matt reaches for the phone again, reporting the assault nearby, and he pauses, sitting in the dark, letting the sounds of the city wash over him. He dials the phone and reports the robbery. And he waits. Dials the phone, reports another robbery, and he continues doing this long into the night. The next day, Matt walks into the bookstore, greeting Mindy and telling her that he just wanted to stop by and say hello. So you're a retail creep, she tells him with a smile, explaining that it's someone who thinks that politeness and excellent customer service is flirting. Well, to be fair, most people flirt with me because I'm an attractive low-level celebrity. He tells her, still smiling, but he waves his hand and just tells her that he's only here to say hello and thank her for her help. Truly my pleasure, Mr. Murdock. You may be a retail creep, but you're my retail creep, she says. And Matt begins to turn and go, but he stops to sniff the air, asking if someone is making a pork loin. My mother-in-law and husband are cooking upstairs. That's impressive, she says as she stares at him in shock. She finally breaks down and invites him over for dinner with her family. We do family-style dinners with guests all the time, and my husband will get a kick out of meeting you. Matt pauses for a moment before accepting. Outside the city, Mayor Fisk fires his rifle, taking out another bird from the sky. He then continues his hunting trip with the New York governor. They talk briefly about Fisk's supposed past before he finally makes his offer to the governor, agreeing to split the land that he owns for growing and selling drugs. If the governor will help him hold back the legalization of certain drugs until their business is secured. The governor smiles and agrees to help Fisk and put him in touch with the right people. Have you ever met the Stormwinds? The governor asks as he misses another bird. I have not, but they're a reputation. Fisk begins, but the governor interrupts him and explains that they're hosting a dinner party for their wealthy friends soon. He looks up to the big man, explaining that he was a little worried to come out into the woods with them. I've actually set my men up in the woods, snipers, in case things went south, he says with a smile as he points over his shoulder. Wilson nods, firing again, taking out another bird, and he turns to leave. I know. My men are behind your men. That night, Matt arrives at Mindy's house, bringing a bottle of wine. She leads him inside and introduces him to the members of the family. Her brother-in-law leads him through the kitchen, introducing him to Mindy's husband, and at the sound of his voice, Matt suddenly stops as he realizes whose Mindy's family is. Dante continues to lead him through the door to the dining room, where he's introduced to Isit Libris. Matt immediately recognizes their woman, her mother, Lavita Libris, Mindy's husband, Tom Libris. A little taken back, Matt sits at the head of the table, the special guest of honor to the Libris crime family. The dinner begins awkwardly, with members of the family pointing out that Matt was a lawyer and the former mayor, working hard against the crime families of the city. Mr. Murdoch, do you know who I am? Lizzie finally asks, and Matt pauses for a moment before finally looking up. Yes, beginning to list off everything he knows about the crime family, how they've never been convicted of any major crimes, how they control Hell's Kitchen, and how Lizzie seems to have gotten out of the drug business after one of her sons OD'd. She smiles at him after he finishes, holding up her wine glass and taking a sip. That's quite impressive. I'm surprised that you would agree to eat with us in our home if you believed such a thing. Matt nods, explaining that he hadn't made the connection. And I probably would have declined the invitation if I had known, he tells her. Lizzie explains that he's free to leave, but knows that he won't since he follows not only the law of the city, but also the laws of polite society. The two then begin a long discussion about how the laws of the criminal world are far more equality-based and fair than the laws of the city that Matt has dedicated his life to. That the laws of the government are merely designed to help the wealthy and push out the poor, either making their lives miserable or keeping them locked away. The rich feed the poor. They keep them down and they push them out, Lizzie tells him, but Matt holds up his hands, telling her that these are merely delusions that the criminals use to justify what they're doing. In the end, criminals always get what's coming to them. Lizzie takes another sip of her wine, admitting that she has thought the same thing before. Maybe they should pack up the family business before it gets too difficult, before they slip up. Your friend, Mayor Fisk, knows, she explains, and Matt is stunned as she tells him that Fisk has packed up his empire, gone legit. It's not true. He must be up to something. Matt begins to stutter, stunned by the news, but he suddenly senses something from outside the window, the building across the street. Everyone down, now! He shouts, but he's already moving, grabbing a nearby bottle of wine. He grabs Mindy's daughter, leaping to the floor as the bullets suddenly explode through the window. Matt rolls, throwing the bottle of wine and breaking the legs out from Grandma's chair, throwing her to the floor. The gunfire stops as Matt tosses the child to Mindy. Stay down. I don't know if the shooter's still out there, he shouts, but Tom gets up, rushing out of the room as Mindy and Matt try to make sure that everyone is safe. Dante is wounded and Matt begins to put pressure on the wound as he tells Mindy to call the police. A short time later, Matt is sitting nearby, having finished answering the police questions about the shooting. I highly doubt that you were the target, but I feel that you're going to need protection, the officer tells him, but Matt explains that he's fine and the cop moves away. Before you go, a voice calls out before Matt can even get up. He turns towards Detective North as he crosses the street. Cole introduces himself to Matt as he helps him up, asking if he is the same Matt Murdoch that helped a man sue Daredevil a few years ago. Yes, I've had a few encounters with Daredevils over the years, but he's dead, isn't he? Cole nods, but explains that he keeps popping up, like an infection. I'm sorry, but I don't understand. What does Daredevil have to do with what happened here? Matt asks him, and Cole nods, explaining that the shooter ran and a civilian gave chase. We recovered the civilian's body 2 blocks back from here. A guy dressed normally except that he was wearing a Daredevil mask. Cole holds up a bag of evidence even though Matt can sense what's inside and he knows. Cole sighs. Daredevil, why won't he die? He says to Matt. It's later that Matt sits in the park with Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and they play chess, exchanging pleasantries before Matt finally asks his big question. So Reed, you're Mr. Fantastic. Do you think that there's a god? Matt asks him. Reed stares at him for a moment, pondering the question, explaining to Matt that he is a man of science, and that science has brought him in contact with some strange things, beings of immeasurable power, realms of life and death, and he finally admits that while he hasn't met one being that claims to have created it all, he believes that one might be out there, though he doubts that this being would care enough about mankind to lay down a set of rules for them to follow. I feel that they instill us with enough innate sense of right and wrong, and we use those to work out our own morals and ethics in the form of religion and laws, he says as he turns back to his chess game. But again, I may be wrong. Reed then puts the question to Matt about whether he has faith in God himself, and the moral compass that he has given him, or in the intrepid word of God that mankind follows. It is later that day that Matt leaves for work, having stayed late due to his late lunch. But the reality is that he stayed late due to Mindy, who he could sense was waiting outside. He pretends that he didn't notice her at first until she steps forward. Matt, can I buy you a drink? The two of them go to a nearby bar where she apologizes for lying to him and springing her family-in-law on him, admitting that she used him to try and get a reaction out of her husband. He used to talk about leaving the business, leaving the city, but he just keeps getting in deeper and deeper. She tells him as she sips her drink. Why don't you just leave? Matt asks her, but Mindy sighs, explaining that she still loves her husband, or at least still has the lingering memories of loving him. He nods, but tells her that things won't get better and eventually people will be arrested or killed. I know. I don't want to leave my life, I just need it to change. She begins to sob, and against his better judgment, Matt moves forward, putting his arm around her, trying to comfort her. Time passes, and once again, Matt finds himself at the church, sitting in a pew discussing his life with Sister Elizabeth. Elizabeth, how do I know when God sends a sign? He asks her, and she nods, explaining that for her, it's the small things in life that she believes are a sign from God. A door opened gently to show her the light. It is such a thing that led her to the church. But Matt becomes distracted as he hears another sister in distress. She sighs and explains that the woman is upset because a teenager has gone missing, someone that she is close to. He has fallen in with some terrible people, she explains, leaving Matt alone, heading over to the group to help comfort her friend. Matt sits alone, pondering the signs that he's been given. Meanwhile, over at the precinct, Detective Cole North stares at the board with Spider-Man sightings, but there's no real pattern to it. He almost sees it as a large spiderweb. Hey, Cole, the officer says, bringing him out of his thoughts, and the man holds up a file telling him that they've got a guy in custody that says that he knows where Spider-Man hangs out. Probably Bull, but I figured you'd want to crack at him, the officer says, pointing Cole towards room 3. Cole thanks him, heading into the room, but he stops short, shocked to find a man beaten and tied up, his face covered. What the heck? Cole hisses as he moves forward, pulling the hood off of the man's face, shocked to see his partner. Get out. Run. Both men turn as the door is locked behind them. The lights click off and the view with the one-way mirror has changed. A group of officers are shrouded in the shadows, and they warn Cole that they know that they can't just kill him. That would be too much of a hassle, but they can kill those close to him. And they warn him that if he doesn't back off, if he doesn't leave the police and the vigilantes alone, they'll kill anyone that he's ever cared about. You want to stop that? You go home. You get out of this precinct. You get out of this city, Cole. Meanwhile, back with Matt, he steps out of the church into the pouring rain. He falls down on the pavement, looking up, reaching out with his senses. He can hear them. Leonard telling his new friends that he just wants to go, that he wants to leave the city. But the leader leans in close, explaining that to leave they need money, and to get money they have to ransom him to his father. He steps out of the room, moving into the next to see how much of the stolen coke they have that they could sell. And he gets mad when he explains that they don't have that much left. Maybe if you didn't snort it all, we'd be better off, he snaps to his friends, and they all look up as a heavy thump sounds off in the room that they left Leonard in. They move back through the darkened room, coming back into the next room to find a strange masked man waiting for them. Matt says nothing as the wind blows and the rain falls behind him. Who the hell? The leader snaps before rushing at him, but Matt dodges, grabbing the guy, throwing him to the ground. Another coming in with a knife, but Matt grabs one of the curtains, twisting his arm around. He ducks under the swinging bat, gently hitting the next thug in a pressure point, forcing him to drop his weapon. The leader gets hit with a blow that forces him to stumble off of the mat, but he ducks and blocks the next few, finally dropping the man to the floor. He falls back against the wall, breathing heavy, looking up as Leonard stands over him, a bat in his hands. Leonard, your family misses you. Matt tells him gently, and the boy stares at him for a moment before dropping the weapon. After freeing the boy who got mixed up with the wrong crowd, Matt walks through the city, the rain falling all around him as he cradles his bruised limbs. He doesn't truly know where he's going until he arrives at Mindy's bookstore. He steps inside with her being in shock at the state of his face and body, but he puts a hand out to stop her from talking. There's a brief moment of hesitation before they embrace, kissing as they find a desk in the store and take comfort in each other's company. It's later that Cole is sitting by Higgins' hospital bed, apologizing to his friend, telling him that he always wanted to do what was right, and that usually only results in him getting hurt, but now others are getting hurt, and he has no choice but to step aside. He walks out of the room with the sound of Higgins' beating heart on the machines following him out into the hallway. Meanwhile, back with Matt. He's in his bed, with Mindy pulling close to him. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he tells himself that he's her white knight. But he knows it isn't true. He knows that he isn't going to take her away from her life, isn't going to be a father to her daughter. His phone buzzes, telling him that it's someone from the office. Work, he tells Mindy as she asks when he answers it. At this hour? That's never good, she tells him, and he sighs as he listens to Tamara on the other end. Nothing good happens at this hour, he tells Mindy as she begins to get dressed, and it doesn't take long for him to arrive at the precinct, not even noticing Cole at his desk. Mr. Murdoch, we have him in lockup, the officer explains as he leads him in the back. He explains that the arresting officer picked up Joe on a stop and frisk and found a weapon on him, violating his parole. Matt nods, asking if he could have a minute alone with the young man. Meanwhile, the precinct begins to become active as the phones begin to ring. Secret orders are being given. The place is being cleared out. Matt stands outside of Joe's cell, asking what happened. The man that he's asking is the brother of the man that he killed as Daredevil. Joe explains that he wasn't doing anything wrong, and Matt asks if he had a gun on him. Joe tells him he did, but explains that Hell's Kitchen is dangerous these days and you better be able to protect yourself. Matt sighs and explains that Joe is going to go to prison, but that'll put him in touch with Foggy Nelson. He's the best. We'll see what he can do for you. Matt tells him, realizing that he set up Joe on this path. He killed Joe's brother. Everything happening to Joe and his family is because of Matt Murdoch. But then he hears the stress in the precinct. He hears the voices on the telephone. He hears the worried whispers as the cops begin to shuffle people out. Meanwhile, back with Mindy, she's walking back towards her bookstore when she looks up in shock to see smoke curling from the front of the store, and she sees fire trucks out front. She rushes forward to find her husband sitting in an ambulance. He looks up at her, apologizing, explaining that he found two of Owl's men downstairs, trying to start the fire. We fought, but they managed to start a small fire. I'm so sorry. I tried to save all the books. I know they're everything to you, he says with tears in his eyes, but she takes his hand and hugs him. Tom, they're not everything. Back at the precinct, Matt looks up as an officer enters the holding cells behind him. Mr. Murdoch, I'm afraid your time is up. We're clearing the station. There's an incident unfolding. He begins to lead Matt Murdoch outside, and Matt follows him, aware that the precinct cameras have suddenly turned off. Gotta lead you out back. It isn't safe, the officer says from in front of him, but Matt is already moving, wrapping his arm around the officer's throat, choking him out. In the bullpen, Cole looks up at the few remaining officers, his hand drifting towards the drawer where he keeps his service pistol. A lot of emergencies happening, he says to Detective Simmons. Yep, Simmons nods, staring at Cole. Need to talk to you. I'll bet you do, Cole says as he gently opens the drawer. Matt pulls out a white cloth covering his face, preparing to move. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He's dead, Simmons tells Cole. He moves fast, drawing his gun from his shoulder rig, but Cole is faster, bringing his pistol up, firing once, hitting Simmons in the shoulder. He begins to try and move as the others open fire, but Cole is across the room, cracking one in the face. One of the other officers opening fire on him, hitting their own men in the shoulder as Cole whirls around, firing, but a stray bullet hits him in the hand, sending his pistol flying. He jumps behind a desk as the others open fire on him, but as they get closer, he throws the desk at them, bellowing in rage. Another officer tackles him to the ground, and they all begin to punch him hard in the face. Give up! A voice calls out to them from the door of the holding cells, and they turn to see the masked man rushing at them, two nightsticks in his hand. Don't make me do this, he hisses, one whirling to aim their pistol at him, but the nightstick flies through the air, hitting him hard in the hand, knocking the weapon away. He leaps among them, kicking and punching his way through them. Cole is up and moving now, grabbing one from behind, slamming his head into the desk, and he begins to choke out the man, squeezing the life out of him. Cole, don't! Matt shouts to him. Trust me, this isn't the way, he says, and Cole looks up, the man in his grasp, gasping. that he did not mean for Higgins to die. Cole doesn't respond and knocks the man out with a punch. He stalks across the room staring at the masked man. They can't pin this on you, but they can't pin this on them either. Matt tells him, pulling out a jacket, picking up one of the fallen pistols. All the cameras are turned off except for the ones in front. You can pin this on me. I came in, stole this gun, and I started firing. It'll buy you some time. Cole stops him from leaving. It's you, isn't it? He says quietly. Matt doesn't answer, turning to leave. But before he does, he turns. I'm sorry about your partner. When you're unbendable, when you pretend that you're unbreakable, others get broken. Daredevil says over his shoulder, rushing out of the building, quickly fleeing the scene. He quickly scales the building, laying out on a rooftop as the rest of the day passes, until the night swallows the city. Finally, a voice approaches him speaking. Taking on the police, barely able to fight, it looks like you need some help, Daredevil. Electra says quietly. She ran into the bedroom door, yelling that her boyfriend was crazy, that he needed to get help, that she called the police. But he kept pounding on the door, yelling that he was going to kill her. And he didn't see the silent devil crawling through the window, coming up behind him. The Daredevil wrapped his arm around the drug-addled man's throat, tightening it quickly. The man grunted, slamming the hero around the apartment, knocking over bookshelves and lamps, but he finally begins to black out as they slam out the door and into the hallway. Daredevil brings him to the ground, breathing heavily as the man goes limp in his grasp. He struggles to his feet, looking down the hallway to see a group of cops approaching. It's okay. I won't put up a fight. I just wanted to help. He gasps, but the cops approach him quickly with their billy clubs, and everything goes dark for Daredevil. Meanwhile, Electra pulls Matt Murdock up by his shirt. You need help. Anyone can see that, she tells him, but he flips her off of him, demanding to know what she's doing back in the city. You're going to die, she says simply as she launches at him, hitting him with a combo of blows that end with a knee to the stomach. He falls down, gasping for air. You've grown soft. Stick trained us, but you've forgotten his teachings. I'm your stick now, she says as she steps towards the edge of the roof, leaping into the night air. Elsewhere in the city, Cole drives through the night with his new partner, and they watch quietly as a group of men begin to mug a nearby woman. Neither cop does anything. Cole's eyes are on the sky above, and that's when he sees a glimpse of a red and blue costume. He's here! Everyone move in! He shouts over the radio. Oh boy, a classic mugging. It's nice to know that people still make time for the traditional crimes, Spider-Man says as he swings down, but all three civilians pull out their pistols, revealing they're all undercover police. Now, Cole yells, allowing the SWAT members to burst out of a nearby van, one of them pulling out a net launcher and firing, but it's Spider-Man. He easily leaps over it, still making quips. He jumps into the air, firing off his webs, closing and sealing the van doors. He then whirls, shooting more webs, trapping the cops' guns to their hands, not allowing them to shoot. Cole comes running up, drawing his own pistol. Freeze! Face down on the ground! He shouts, but Spider-Man cocks his head to the side as he stares at the cops. Wait a second, I know you! Detective North, he says as he webs up Cole, lifting him into the sky, swinging away. Let's go find a quiet spot without so many guns, because we're gonna have a little chat. The next morning, Matt is walking through his neighborhood, and he stops at a local store where he managed to get his parolee, Joel Carraro, a job. The young man pulls up at the exact moment, passing by Matt, thanking him for the help, but barely making eye contact. He's nervous. His system is spiking. He knows that I'm Daredevil, Matt thinks to himself, remembering that Joe was in the cell at the police station when he had to save Cole. Matt had no choice but to walk away. Meanwhile, at the local airport, Fisk's guards open up the trunk of his car, revealing a frightened Osley. The man is pulled free, his gag removed, as they bring him before Fisk. Damn it, Fisk, what the hell is this? He demands to know. Shut up. Fisk says simply over his shoulder, telling Owlsy that he wants to send him on a trip. He turns around, reminding Osley that he's doing the opposite of what Fisk requested, fighting a war with the Libris family, running drugs through Hell's Kitchen. Normally, I would kill you, but I'm feeling magnanimous today, Fisk tells him, informing him that he's going to send Owl to a private island where he can relax while Fisk fixes the situation, but Owl smiles. No, he says simply, his talons working quickly on the ropes that bind his hands. I ain't going nowhere. You're out of the game, Wilson. Seems to me you have plans that could get derailed if your life is dragged into the light. He rips apart the ropes, quickly lashing out, slashing at the throat of Fisk's guards. With that, he leaps into the air and begins to fly away. It looks like you should start to play it safe, Mr. Mayor. But back with Spider-Man and Cole on a rooftop across the city. Cole is webbed up as Spider-Man continues to watch the sunrise. For the last time, what are we doing here? He asks, glaring at Spider-Man as the hero walks towards him, telling him that the vigilantes feel that they are above the law. You know what? Yeah, I kinda do. Happy now? Spider-Man tells him. And Spider-Man points out that there aren't really any laws for people who can do what he does, save people and wear a mask to protect the ones that they love. And he knows that Cole swore an oath. Well, so did I. So did we all. Sometimes we mess up, like your previous punching bag Daredevil, but guess what? We solve it. He says, revealing that he told the Daredevil to hang up the tights, to give up being Daredevil, to stop fighting. But I won't let him rot in prison under Mayor Fisk. He's a hero. Spider-Man snaps, and he turns away telling Cole, you need to start thinking about what's right and wrong. In an hour, my webbing's going to dissolve, which happens as Cole struggles again, pulling himself free, his gun in his hand. So you have a choice. Do you want to save lives, Detective Cole, or uphold the law? Nearby, Matt and Foggy are standing in line for lunch, talking about how Foggy helped Joe get out of jail that day, but his phone beeps and Matt steps aside. Mindy is on the other line asking if she can see Matt, as she feels trapped in her family's home due to the mob war. But Matt isn't listening anymore. He stretches out with his senses and he can feel that someone is in trouble. He realizes the one that is in trouble is Daredevil, tied to a chair, surrounded by the cops. Blood is dripping from his mouth as the cops are laughing and joking with him. One leans down, pushing Daredevil's chin up with his nightstick, reminding the hero that laws don't mean anything in the kitchen. And neither do you, neighborhood watch. The cop says with a smile to the man dressed as Daredevil. One of the other cops steps forward, asking if they're done so that he can start his shift. Not gonna be around for the cleanup, he tells the others. But they all pause in shock as they hear a knock at the door. They turn to the door, with one finally opening it, his pistol in his hand and out of sight. Who the hell are you? He asks as he sees a nervous Foggy standing in the hallway, cell phone put to his ear. Officer, I'm Michael Nelson, and you are unlawfully detaining my client. Foggy stammers, sweat pouring down his face as he explains to the cop that he is on the line with another lawyer who will call the police if he hears anything go wrong. He steps into the apartment looking at the gathered police and this tied-up Daredevil. Here's my solution. Untie my client and let us walk out of here and you will never see us again, he says, still sweating. The cops begin to uncuff the man, reminding Foggy, you are playing a dangerous game. Foggy nods, leading the man towards the door, but they're stopped by one of the cops who raises his pistol. Do me a favor, show me your phone. Foggy has no choice, showing him the phone, revealing that he's currently leaving a voicemail. Oh, you're dead, the cop hisses as he steps forward with his pistol. What he doesn't realize is that Matt is standing in the hallway just around the corner, his face covered by a t-shirt. Foggy is plan A, I'm plan B. Matt thinks to himself as he whirls around, grabbing the man's gun, pulling it from his grasp. He barrels into the other man, tackling him into the apartment as the other cops gasp in surprise. He's up and moving fast, nightsticks in his hand. One of the cops grabs him from behind, but he whirls around, throwing the nightstick, knocking another pistol out of the other cop's hand. He doesn't need to beat them, he just has to distract them long enough for Foggy and this other Daredevil to get out of the building. But the cop tightens his lock around Matt's throat. He can't breathe. He pushes back, they both go out the window, and Matt twists, knocking the cop away, quickly grabbing his cuffs, cuffing him to the fire escape. He hears the other cop shout as he heads up, running towards the roof. He needs to lure them away. Meanwhile, Fisk's car pulls up outside the mansion of the Stromwins, the highly influential billionaires that the governor has set him up with. He turns to Wesley, his aide, who is trying to prepare him, but he holds his hand up to stop the man. Wesley, we're here. We've earned it. The only preparation now is to exist, to recognize this new phase and embrace it. He tells his aide and friend. Wesley smiles as he watches Fisk step out of the car and walk up the steps of the mansion. He's led through the house until they reach the salon and are introduced to the Stromwins and the other guests. Thank you for inviting me, Quinn. I'm looking forward to this, he tells Quinn Stromman after they're introduced. Fisk smiles to the others as he's led into the next room and introduced to everyone at the table. Meanwhile, back with Matt Murdock. I'm not trapped. I can jump rooftop to rooftop and get away easy. I used to be Daredevil. But he turns, still able to hear Foggy and the other Daredevil moving through the building. Why is he still in the building? He turns as the others come out of the stair access, rushing forward. Sensing another gun and having nothing to throw, he listens. Sensing the man's aim and trigger placement, he dodges as the round goes past him. But he can sense it go through a window across from him. He can sense a mother and child screaming in fear. He's amongst the cops now, kicking and punching, trying to block the blows that are raining down upon him. But there are too many, and they begin to bring down Matt Murdock. Kicks raining down on him as he tries to block his face, his vitals. They don't fear me, he thinks to himself. At the Stromwinds, Fisk continues to cut into his food as the rich people around him continue to talk about how they are secretly running things. The conversation turns to him, and Tyler begins to make a small suggestion about Fisk's rise to power and past. Ty, don't insult our guests, Quinn reminds his friend. But Fisk waves the comments away, explaining that since taking office, he has begun to diversify his empire into more legitimate businesses. Several more comments are then made, but one of the guests finally asks Wilson if he's ever personally killed a man. Fisk pauses for a moment as he regards the group, but Quinn puts a hand up. All right, that's enough. This man is the mayor. Please show him the respect that the position deserves. Agreed. Frankly, I'm intrigued by your legal marijuana push, one of the other guests asks. Fisk smiles, explaining that he has bought up several farms around the state and brought the best minds in to cultivate the weed business, pushing for it to become legal in New York. The others aren't so sure, as some of their businesses work better if weed is illegal. More jokes are passed around at Fisk's expense until he finally pushes away from the table, requesting the location of the nearest washroom. Down the hall and to the left, and again, I apologize for my guest's rudeness, Mayor, Quinn tells him as he points. Fisk leaves the room, but he can still hear them talking about him, making their jabs, making jokes about him. The Kingpin is nothing but a joke. And anger begins to fill up inside of him. Meanwhile, back with Matt Murdock, he looks up, his sense telling him that the other Daredevil and Foggy have joined the fight instead of running. There are still too many cops, and one of the officers attacks the other Daredevil, about to knock him off the building. No, nobody dies! Matt thinks to himself as he rushes forward, grabbing the guy's leg before he can plummet to the street below. But he can't defend himself now. The cops are surrounding him, kicks and punches, slamming into his face. And then, they're gone. Matt looks up to sense Electra standing over him. Everyone's down. There's nothing sadder than a man that won't admit that he needs help. Electra tells him with a sigh as she pulls the other Daredevil back onto the roof. You didn't kill them, did you? Matt gasps as she shakes her head, telling him that she wanted to prove to him that it could be done, that she can show him the other way. Train with me, she says, holding out her hand, and Matt pauses for a moment before taking it. Meanwhile, back with Wilson, he looks at himself in the mirror before splashing water on his face. These people, he knows it's just a new game, one that he has to play. He dries his face, reminding himself that he is in control, and then there's a knock at the door as he opens it to reveal Tyler, the man grinning at him. I assume there's still a working toilet in here? He asks, still ribbing Fisk on. He keeps talking, he keeps joking, he keeps thinking that he can say what he wants to the Kingpin. And Fisk's hand suddenly snaps out, grabbing him by the throat, dragging him into the bathroom as the man gasps for air. A look of terror fills his eyes as Fisk's fists come down again and again. It's over fast. And Fisk finally stares down at all the blood and shock, and the body that he stuffed into the tub. Matt hangs up after another unsuccessful call to Mindy, a staff tapping his shoulder as he turns his head to regard Electra. Your first lesson, concentration, she tells him as she tosses him his own staff, and he whirls the staff in his hand, dropping into a fighting stance ready. Meanwhile, back with Wilson Fisk, he stares down at all of the blood, knowing that if anyone discovered that he did this, it would end him. It would end his life as the mayor. He reaches for his phone, dialing his aide, Wesley. Wesley, I need your help. I don't know what to do. He stammers and stutters quietly, and Wesley steps out of his car, hearing the details of Fisk's situation. Stay where you are. I'll be there momentarily, he says simply as he begins to walk towards the house. Wesley is quick and professional. He gets the information that he needs about the staff, and he heads to the back of the house. He steps into the kitchen, locating Julio Oliveira's, and walks towards him. He promises that if he does exactly what he says, then no harm will come to his family. At 245 Symington, the man's eyes go wide with shock as he follows Wesley without a word. They arrive at the bathroom that Fisk has locked himself into, with Wesley ordering the mayor to not leave so that he doesn't spread more blood. He orders Fisk to remove the body and he turns to Julio. This is an intense situation. If you scream, I will kill your family. Wesley promises to the cleaning man. Fisk opens the door with Tyler's body and it's placed into the cleaning cart. With that done, Julio is let into the bathroom to start cleaning. Next, he informs the mayor that he will call in the incident as a suicide and allow the police to arrive. Wesley turns to Fisk's driver, handing him Tyler's keys, ordering him to return with the cleaning cart when the work is done. The driver nods and quickly leaves with the body. Meanwhile, the staff strikes Matt in the jaw, sending him to the ground. What do you want? Electra asks him as she twirls her weapon. To be better, Matt says as he struggles to his feet. He dodges another strike as Electra sighs, reminding him that he's never had an actual goal. You can't work without goals, because if you don't have goals, you fail. She says as she blocks his blow, striking him in the chest, and Matt doubles over as she walks away. So let's have some focus. You want to play your old game? Remember the last time that you did, someone died. She points out, informing him that he must gain control, and to do that, he must have knowledge. Matt kneels, breathing deeply, stretching out his senses. Before any blow is struck, you should know this room, know your opponent, know yourself. Breathe, use your talents. If you know everything, nothing can surprise you. He senses her moving behind him, senses her shift to attack, and he brings up his staff, blocking the blow. He then shifts again, lashing out, cracking her in the shoulder. She grunts off the pain, smiling at him. It's been a long time since someone's managed that. See what goals can get you? Meanwhile, back at the Stromwyms, the cart is returned and Wesley heads back into the bathroom, asking if Julio is finished. The man shakes his head, still trying to clean up the blood, but Wesley shakes his head, telling him that it's perfect. It's as good a job as can be expected under the circumstances, he says with a smile, and then he reaches into one of the drawers, pulling out a razor blade. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to not look like murder. Fisk's driver grabs Julio from behind, covering his mouth so that he can't scream. I'm sorry, Julio, your family will be compensated, Wesley promises as he hands the razor to Fisk. Meanwhile, at the public library, the owl laughs as he realizes that Lizzie Libris asked to meet him there because she felt that he wouldn't try anything in a public space. She looks at him as they walk along, finally accusing him of attacking her family directly and trying to burn down everything that they own. You may try to hide it. Lay the blame elsewhere, she begins to say, but Owl smiles, shaking his head. I did it. She's stunned by his straight-up confession, but he merely turns to his henchman. Do you need corroboration? Butch, did I try to kill Izzy Libras here? The man laughs and nods. You most certainly did, boss, he says, and she gets angry, pointing out that this isn't how they do things. They don't attack each other's families. There are rules in place. There used to be. Owl nods, but he does admit that killing her was a mistake. His men suddenly pull out their pistols and shoot Lizzie's men, ignoring the screaming civilians that are suddenly rushing out of the library. Owl smiles, getting close to Libris. Now I want you alive to tell your remaining men to follow the new Kingpin of New York. A smooth transition. I'm not scared of you, the cops, or Fisk. The Owl is in charge, he says, turning away, walking out of the library quietly. Meanwhile, the police have arrived at the Stromwyms, questioning everybody about what happened. Fisk's story works. Julio committed suicide and Fisk found the body. But the Stromwyms know. They know the truth. There's no other thing that could have happened. And they stare at Fisk as he tells his story. Elsewhere, Detective Cole North walks out of the police precinct. He's been put on 2 weeks leave pending a psych eval, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what is the right thing to do when he finally slides down, sitting against the wall, lost. A shadow suddenly falling over him. Hey, buy you a cup of coffee? Matt asks, looking down at him, his face covered by a dark mask. A short time later, the waitress is looking down at the two men at the booth. So just coffees? She begins to state, but stops when she sees Matt's masked face. You're not gonna rob us, are you? She asks after a pause, and Matt smiles up at her. No, ma'am, just sensitive to the light is all. He tells her. Cole nods, still glaring at Matt as he promises the woman that he won't let anything happen. I'm a cop, he tells her. The waitress just shakes her head, walking away. I should be taking you in right now. Cole hisses at Matt, who nods and agrees. I know. I understand the law. Matt begins to tell him, explaining that he never intended to come back, but he realized that the system has rot and he can't ignore it, that he's trying to make amends for what happened to Leo Carrero. Cole just gets angry, telling Matt that the law isn't about guilt, it's about accountability. He sighs, hanging his head, explaining that the reason that he left Chicago was because he accidentally shot a kid. He was chasing a drug dealer, rounded a corner, and saw someone with a gun. It was a phone. He heard the commotion and wanted a video. But he explains that he was investigated, answered for his actions, because he believes that no one is above the law. Matt stares at him for a moment before shaking his head. You're wrong. Everyone isn't equal in the eyes of the law. The rules bend when you're a cop. He tells Cole that anyone else would have gone to jail for what he did. They argue for another moment before Cole finally stands up, walking out of the diner. Matt follows him, questioning why he isn't arresting him. I don't know, Cole tells him with a sigh, explaining that it shouldn't make a difference, but the fact that Daredevil helped him in the precinct has made him rethink things. Everywhere I look these days, I see enemies. And then, there you are, saving me. I have enough enemies, he says, stopping and turning back to Matt. Matt nods, explaining that someone high up ordered the police to stay out of the kitchen. There's a gang war happening with Fisk stepping away from his throne. People are getting hurt. Someone high up wants this, and I'm gonna find out who. And I need your help to fix the kitchen, to root out the dirty cops, he tells Cole, who just stares at him as he turns away, asking him to think about it. But Cole calls out to the masked man. Are you back? Am I looking at Daredevil? But Matt keeps walking, finally calling over his shoulder. No, I've made too many mistakes as Daredevil. For now, I'm just a concerned citizen. Meanwhile, back over at Fisk's apartment, Wesley walks in to find that Wilson is planning on working from home again, having hidden from the world since the incident at the Stromwinds. But Fisk finally waves off Wesley's concerns. It's a small embarrassment, nothing more. I will beat them by proving myself. But Wesley's phone buzzes with concern, and Fisk turns on the news, finding the station covering a protest on the farmland that he acquired, with the protesters demanding that the land not be used for drugs, but for local-grown food. Wesley gets back on the phone, talking to one of their aides, trying to set up a counter-protest, but the call is suddenly interrupted and his eyes widen. Hello, Wesley. It's Una Stromwin here, with my brother Quinn. May we speak to Wilson, please? Fisk takes the phone and the Stromwins apologize for the unfortunate incident in their home and the run of bad luck that Wilson is having with protesters. We'd like you to come to our campus this Wednesday to discuss ways that we can help. They hang up the phone before Fisk can say anything, and he stares at the phone in disbelief. Finally, anger filling him up, and he throws the device against the room, scattering his breakfast as he bellows in rage. Meanwhile, at Matt's apartment, he once again calls in sick, trying to figure out how to find the information that he needs to help the kitchen. His thoughts are interrupted by the doorbell, and he opens it to reveal Mindy. He brings her in, once again apologizing for ending their call so abruptly the other day. He sits her down, asking her to take her daughter and leave the city, believing that Hell's Kitchen is no longer safe for her, and that he cares for her. But she just gets angry with him, accusing him of doing exactly what her husband is doing and trying to control her. All she wanted was a casual fling with him. He tries to reason with her, but she slaps him in the face and storms out of the apartment. You're an idiot, Matt Murdock, she shouts as she slams the door. Matt just stares at her, knowing that she's right. But he shakes his head, crossing the room, opening the closet to reveal the black uniform that he's been using in lieu of his Daredevil costume. Elsewhere, Hammerhead walks through the doors into Lizzie Libris's base of operations. Hammerhead nods, admitting that it seems like war, and Lizzie agrees, offering him an alliance. Share the assets between the two families, and she holds out her hand. Hammerhead regards her for a moment before taking her hand. That's a smart play. I'm in, he says, and with this done, he turns to walk out. Meanwhile, Matt is sitting on the rooftop, looking down on his city. He senses her coming, rolls around quickly, ducking under attack, throwing out a kick, and the blow takes her in the stomach, throwing her to the ground. Electra notes not bad as she jumps up, attacking again, and they talk as they exchange blows until Matt finally pins her to the ground, explaining to her that they're sitting on the roof of the police headquarters. While Matt listens to the commissioner talk about how he orders his police out of Hell's Kitchen. I listen, and apparently he has to answer to the governor, Matt says as he lets Electra up. He tells her that he's tired of going after the small fish, and he plans to go after the governor. You in? She smiles and nods. Yes, I think I can handle that. Fisk, meanwhile, arrives on Stromwind's campus, stepping through the metal detectors as the security guards order him not to touch the Stromwinds at all. Meanwhile, Foggy opens up his office door to find Matt sitting at his desk, feet up. What the hell? I haven't seen you since I saved your life, Foggy snaps at him, and Matt smiles. I'm not sure that's exactly how it went down, he says, but he thanks Foggy, who quickly fills him in on the situation with the fake Daredevil and how he's been helping Joey Carrero. Matt sits up from the desk, revealing his tactical uniform to Foggy, who stares at him. Are you kidding me? You're Daredevil again? After everything you said? Foggy asks, anger flashing across his face, but Matt shakes his head, telling Foggy that Daredevil is dead. he's trying to be something different, and that he isn't just wildly swinging at people. Why are you telling me this, Matt? Foggy demands, but Matt explains that he wants this to be different, that he doesn't want to keep secrets from Foggy this time, that he wants to show him that this is different. Also, Joe knows that I'm Daredevil. He says as he reaches for his coat, telling Foggy that the young man saw him at the precinct when he saved Detective North. He turns walking out of the office, wishing Foggy good luck with his clients. Finally, Fisk has arrived at Strom Wynn's office. "Thank you for having time to meet us. We know you're busy, Mayor," Una says with a smile from behind the desk. "I have all the time in the world for new friends," he tells them, expressionless. "Excellent. Since Una and I seem to be losing them," Quinn tells him with a smile. But Una isn't interested in beating around the bush, telling Fisk that they know that he murdered Tyler. He doesn't deny it and apologizes for allowing his temper to get out of hand. "He was your friend and I'm sorry," Fisk says simply, but Strom Wynn's thank him for the apology, but reveal that his death isn't why they're upset. It's that he did it in their home without their permission. That his act forced the police into their home. "That's why you're being punished," Quinn explains, telling Fisk that the protesters and the shutting down of his drug legalization is their doing. But Una sits back down at the desk, revealing that they feel that Fisk needs a stronger lesson to learn not to mess with them. And the door behind him slides open, revealing 3 armored soldiers. Fisk's eyes narrow as he regards them over his shoulder. "I am the mayor of New York City. Whatever you plan here, it is a mistake. I am not the man you think I am. I have not been for quite some time," he tells them, but the Strom Wynns raise their glasses to him, knowing exactly the type of man that he is. Fisk sighs, removing his jacket, rolling up his sleeves. At the governor's mansion, Electra watches the house from the darkness of the forest, pointing out the perimeter defenses to Matt. They move forward through the trees, using the darkness around them to hide their approach. They're on the rooftop in moments. Inside seconds after that. The governor is inside his study, looking up from his work, his eyes widening at the 2 ninjas in his parlor. "Governor Kettle, my friend here has some questions, and if you say or scream anything other than the answers, I will most likely kill you." Electra says that she stalks forward, drawing one of her sais. She puts it to his throat, pushing his back against his desk. "I'll try to stop her, but I might not succeed," Matt says before asking why he ordered the police commissioner to order the cops out of the kitchen. Kettle doesn't fight, immediately telling the 2 that the Strom Wynns ordered him to do it. "You gave them up way too easily," Matt notes, but Kettle just nods, admitting that it doesn't matter. They can't be touched. "You're just a guy in a mask. You could scream it off the rooftops, but who would listen?" he says, smiling as he continues to sweat, and Matt regards him for a moment before turning back to Electra. "We have to move," he says, with seconds later the doors bursting open to reveal the security officers. Meanwhile, back with Fisk, the armored soldiers rush him. He puts up a fight, hammering them down, but they shrug off the blows, hitting him again and again. They slap him around the office, throwing him through a bookshelf and into a desk. Fisk is out of shape and he knows it. He knows that he could beat them as the Kingpin, but not as the mayor. Blood pours out of the wounds on his body as he looks up at the smiling faces of the Strom Wynns. Matt and Electra leap over the security guards, avoiding their attacks. "No killing! Close your eyes!" Matt hisses her as he throws a flashbang. The grenade explodes, flooding the room with light and sound as the 2 rush out of the door. But they hit the balcony and look out on the front drive as Matt curses when he sees the police approaching. "We must have missed someone," Electra hisses. Back with Fisk, he's beaten, one of the soldiers holding him up. "Here's the deal, Wilson," Quinn tells him as he sips his drink, stepping forward. He explains to Wilson that this isn't their way of telling him that he works for them. "No, that would be insulting, and frankly, we don't need you," Una says. The soldier drags him over to the window. "But we don't actually like you. So much so that we've already called the paramedics. Get well soon," she says with a wave. Fisk's eyes widen as the soldier lifts him up, tossing him through the glass. It shatters around him as he plummets towards the pavement below, slamming hard into the grass just next to the sidewalk. Just as the paramedics are pulling up. Back at the mansion, Matt and Electra roar out of the garage in a sports car, screeching through the night roads. Matt quickly brakes the taillights, taking the wheel from Electra, driving them through the darkness of the night. He pulls off the road and they both hide in the forest, allowing the police to drive past. "All right, that should buy us enough time to make our way back to the car in front," he whispers to her as they get out of the car they're in. With Electra laughing, she grabs Matt, kissing him roughly as she pulls him down onto the hood of the car. "Don't you feel it? You're back," she says with a smile. In the office of Foggy Nelson, he sits across from Joe Carrero, explaining that with everything that happened at the station, there is a chance that he can get off. But Foggy pauses, putting his hands on his head, explaining that he might be able to leverage some information that he has. You know the Daredevil's identity, and you know that he's wanted for murder. Looking across at his client, Joey pauses for a moment before responding. He is. He murdered my brother, Joey says quietly. Meanwhile, over at Electra's penthouse, she sits up in bed as Matt pours her a cup of coffee. Still black, I presume, he says as he slips back into her bed. She smiles that he remembered, but pauses and points out how strange it is that all of the things that she seems to have forgotten. Is our history really just me with a fighter in a mask? She asks as she pulls down her coffee. Matt pulls away. He knows that Electra has forgotten his true identity, along with everyone else when the Purple Man's children wiped out their memories of him from the world. The conversation is interrupted as Electra's phone begins to buzz, and she checks her messages explaining to Matt that she has gotten word that the Stormwinds have had a run-in with Mayor Fisk. It's later that Fisk looks up from his hospital bed, a breeze blowing through the curtains as he stares at the dark shape of Daredevil in his room. No, he says simply, but Daredevil ignores him. I'm dead, Wilson. This is a ghost visiting you. I just need to know, did the Stormwinds do this? He asks, and Wilson puts down his paper. His eyes are hard as he stares at his greatest enemy. You were out. I knew you weren't dead. You'll live until I decide otherwise. That you were out, and through the fire in my belly, past the hatred for you that sustains me, I was almost happy for you. You got out, Kingpin says, and with a slight smile. But Daredevil isn't playing with him. He takes a step forward, demanding to know if Fisk knew about the Stormwinds' order to keep the police out of the kitchen. Fisk pauses for a moment before he bursts out laughing. I was so wrong. I won't kill you. Hell's Kitchen will kill you, he says, and Daredevil turns away from him, leaping out the window, disappearing into the night. Elsewhere in the city, Izzy Libris orders her driver to stop the car as they pass a bar that has been destroyed. She gets out shouting for Hammerhead, and the mobster steps forward, cleaning the blood off of his knife. She demands to know what happened, and he tells her that they had a tip that Owl's men were working out of the bar. Tip was wrong, but the guys in there, they were still itching for a fight, he says with a smile to his men. She begins to yell at him for working in the kitchen, but he stops her, explaining that she wanted this partnership. This is what a partnership looks like, he tells her, and he finally walks away, telling her that he is in charge, and when they take out the Owl, he will be the new Kingpin in New York. Until then, Hell's Kitchen is mine, he tells her as he looks over his shoulder. Matt, meanwhile, doesn't know what to do. The city is dark around him as he sits on the rooftop. He quiets his heart, steadying his breath, reaching out with his senses, feeling the city around him, every bit of light and shadow of darkness, hopes and despair. Are you good? Electra asks him from nearby, and he nods, turning to her, confirming that Fisk's heartbeat told him that it was the Stormwinds that hurt him. So what do you want to do? What are you ready for? She asks him, and he stands, telling her that he needs to hit them hard and give back to his neighborhood. She nods, holding up a flash drive. If you trust me, I think I know how to give it back. Meanwhile, over at the precinct, Detective North steps into the police chief's office. She begins to ask him a question, but he interrupts her. He knows that she knows exactly what happened in the precinct. Those dirty cops tried to kill him. He knows that someone has dirt on her, but she is actually a good cop. Finally, he turns to leave the office, telling her that he isn't hunting down vigilantes anymore, that he's going to work in the kitchen, actually help people, and stop the Owl. And once I'm done with the Owl, I'll be transferring to internal affairs, he says as he shuts her office door. That night, at the Sectotech building, Matt takes his hand away from the window, telling Electra that he doesn't hear anything inside as she cuts the glass. You won't see any, she whispers as they move through the shadows of the building, explaining that the Stormwinds employ a group of ninja guards known as the Drifting. They move through the building, quickly making their way to the server room, dropping down from the vents, and Electra moves to the servers while Matt watches her back. He pauses as he senses their company. Damn it, he whispers. He knows that he's not ready for this fight, but he knows that he has to be. He rounds the corner, quickly seeing three ninjas, blocking one of their swords, pivoting to kick another. He ducks under another attack, kicking the ninja in the face, but the enemy whirls around, kicking him hard in the jaw. He moves, blocking another blow before twisting and taking out the final two. I got it, let's run, Electra begins to say as she grabs the USB rounding the corner, but as she stops short, she sees Matt standing over the fallen ninjas. It's the next day that Quinn Stromwin learns of the attack on his server farm. He learns that $3 billion were stolen and distributed to various charities. He knows that that money is gone, but smiles as he opens up a folder to find images of Electra and Daredevil in his facility. "I'm interested to find who did this," he tells his assistant. At her apartment, Electra steps out of the shadow, asking if Matt has a warm and fuzzy about their mission as he wraps a band-aid around bruised ribs. He looks up at her, finally asking why she came back to help him. "What can I say? You've grown on me. The sad, broken puppy that I need to nurse back to health." But Matt can sense that she's lying. Her heartbeat doesn't speed up like other people, it actually slows down, showing her level of control. "You took the money, didn't you?" he asks, and she nods, confirming she stole $1 billion of it. "I'm starting something big, and I needed a kickstart," she explains. But he doesn't answer, turning and walking out of the apartment. She sighs, leaning back up against the bathroom sink. "It's okay. Later," she says with a smile. Behind her, the name Matthew has been written on the mirror in the condensation. The next day, the broke residents and businesses of Hell's Kitchen have come into a windfall overnight, the Stromwim's money having been distributed throughout the neighborhood. Matt moves throughout it, able to sense everyone's surprise and happiness over the incoming money. He stops at an apartment building and pushes the buzzer, asking Mrs. Carrero if he could come up. The kindly old woman lets him in, offering to get him a glass of water, heading into the kitchen. Matt tells her that his law firm received some money and that he would like to offer it to her to help out with any problems that they might be having. "I know," she tells him, causing him to pause in shock. "Joey told me. You're him, the man who killed my boy. Daredevil," she says. Matt begins to stammer out an excuse. His identity has been revealed to the family that he murdered the boy of. She stops, turning to look back at the man that killed her boy. "You killed my child. He was my light, and he was on a terrible path. I have no doubt what happened was a mistake. I can see it in your face," she tells him as Matt covers his face with his hand. She tells him that Joey told her that he doesn't know what to do to punish Matt. She comes forward, putting an arm around him. "Anyone can see. You're punishing yourself. And you should, it's only fair. My heart is broken. You made a mistake and he is gone. But I know that you help people and that you will carry this. I forgive you," she says, and a tear falls down Matt's cheek as she pulls him in for a big hug. Meanwhile, at another bar, Hammerhead hits a thug, letting him know that if he wants to sell drugs in the kitchen, the new boss will be given a cut. He's then interrupted as Libris walks through the door, flanked by her guards, and she tells him about the money that came into the kitchen and how she's decided to use it to buy a few more guards. "I'm thinking about taking you out," she tells him, and he smiles, turning from the bar as his goons pull out their guns. "What did you say?" But she smiles as the goons turn their guns on Hammerhead, explaining that the new boss doesn't inspire loyalty within his men. The goons shrug, pulling the trigger, and Izzy turns away, walking out of the bar, leaving Hammerhead in a pool of his own blood. Meanwhile, over at Fisk's penthouse, Wesley steps out onto the patio to find the mayor staring out over his city. He tells them that they can move things around so that Fisk can continue to work from home. But he was supposed to go to the gala, and it will cause a massive issue with the schedule if he doesn't attend. "Are the Stromwims going to be there?" Fisk asks quietly. Wesley informs him yes with a nod. So Fisk turns to stare at his assistant. Meanwhile, Owl is shocked at Izzy's nerve of taking out Hammerhead. He doesn't need her to continue to be an issue as he stands at his desk. He looks to Butch, his right-hand man, telling him that they need to take Izzy off the table quietly. "Family, Butch, you know what to do," he says with a nod towards the door. The thug smiles, motioning to his men to follow him. "Absolutely," he says as they walk out. It's that night that Matt finds himself attending the gala for the Stromwims. Having been the mayor, he's able to go to all sorts of parties. He moves through the procession line quickly, his cane tapping as the paparazzi cameras all flash around him. He moves through the crowds quickly, finding the bathroom where he stashed a different mask to hide his identity in this event. Meanwhile, Mindy moves through the dark city streets with her daughter. Tom catching up with them, explaining that his mother made everything safe for the family. "Safe? She put us in more danger. I'm not letting myself into Belle," she begins to shout at him. But Belle tugs at her mom's jacket. "Mommy, Daddy, I don't like," she begins to say, pointing at the three thugs as they step out of the van. "It's okay, kid. Everything will be fine," Butch says from behind his mask, his men loading up their pistols behind him. Matt, meanwhile, is moving through the crowd. His senses are overloaded by the vast number of people and smells at this party, but he finally finds the Stromwims. Pushing through those who waited to talk to them, guards step forward, but Quinn waves them off. "And you are?" Una asks with a smile, Matt hiding behind his mask, telling them that he is a concerned citizen with questions. Quinn smiles at him. "You don't seem like a reporter. You stand straight and wear that tuxedo like a second skin," appraising Matt as he asks what he is concerned about. "Tell me about Hell's Kitchen," Matt says simply. Una nods and whispers to one of her guards as Matt begins to ask them why the police were ordered out of the kitchen and a gang war was provoked. The crowds begin to disperse as Quinn smiles, beginning with the lie about how they are merely business people. "But who cares? If you have a recording device on you, we'll destroy it. If you spread the story, we'll kill everyone you talked to. If you give the story to the media, we'll buy the media, provided we don't already own it," he says. Una steps back, explaining that she only vaguely remembers seeing the proposal for Hell's Kitchen come across her desk. How it was the usual thing to drive up crime and bring the housing down, so that they could buy it and revitalize it. Quinn's smile disappears. "We know who you are. The big bad devil, thinking we had plans to ruin your home. But really, we barely gave it a thought." Matt stands quietly. He knew the room was emptying, and he could sense the guards rushing towards him. The old him would have fought until his knuckles bled, but he whirls around, leaping over the first attacks, rushing for the exit. He leaps through a window, rushing out into safety, quickly ascending towards the rooftops. He got what he wanted, a reason. So the question is now, what does he do with it? What was his plan to take out the wealthiest family in the world? He stops on the rooftop as his phone is buzzing, her words hitting him quickly and his eyes widening as she tells him what happened. "You used to represent superheroes. I need your help. I need their help. He took Belle," Mindy shouts breathlessly. Back at the gala, the Stromwims head towards their car, with Una questioning if Daredevil will be a problem, someone for them to worry about. Quinn shakes his head as he ducks into the car, believing that they'll have to speed up their plans for the kitchen. "What was the name of the man we had on retainer? Bullseye?" he says as the car pulls away. "What the hell are you doing?" Mindy shouts to Izzy, demanding to know why she has 8 people guarding her while Belle is missing. The guards move to calm her as Izzy informs her that there are several people looking for Belle. Tom tries to jump in, but Izzy pulls her hand, explaining to her son and daughter-in-law that she is handling the situation. "I will get my granddaughter back," she says calmly. She stands, explaining that the police won't help them since it's a Hell's Kitchen problem now. And Kingpin has ordered all the police out of Hell's Kitchen. "But if we had proof, they would get involved," she says, leaning over the large family table, speaking to Mindy. Tom stands nearby, beginning to nod. But then he turns, heading towards the door. "Well then, I'll get proof," he says. Izzy rushes after her son, and he stops at the door, telling his mother that he can't just stand around. "I know. Just be careful. I love you, son," she says, pulling him into a surprising hug. Tom finally pulls away and heads out the door. Meanwhile, over at the precinct, Cole steps through the door, glaring at the group of police that are just sitting around doing nothing. They all stop what they're doing, and they look back at the angry detective. "A child is missing, taken by a mobster in a gang war that you're all too scared to stop," he snaps. He looks at them, explaining that people are dying and they're just sitting here doing nothing. "I'm sick of being a bad cop. Our neighborhood is on fire and a little girl is missing, and we know who took her. So which of you are gonna join me and be a cop?" he says. The anger left his voice, and a moment passes before the cops all stand up, finally with him. And Cole actually smiles. "Well, all right. Let's do the job," he says, and they quickly head outside to their squad cars. Cole's phone buzzes and he answers it, hearing the voice of Daredevil on the other end. Matt explains that he found the source of the police problem, but they can't focus on that. "I know," Cole tells him, letting him know that the police are moving to find Belle. "We're heading to the kitchen, overriding the order," he explains as they begin to move through the neighborhood. Matt nods as he continues to leap across the rooftops, hanging up after Cole tells him not to do anything stupid. "I want to bring him in by the book. Owls need to go away for this, not just get beat up," Cole says before he hangs up, and Matt nods as he looks out over the city, stretching out with his senses. He reaches down, pulling on the white scarf to cover his face. He knows that Cole won't be able to get answers out of Owl, but I will, he thinks to himself as he pulls that mask on. Meanwhile, over at Owl's hideout, Butch leans back on the desk, his thugs watching their security cameras, warning him about the approaching police. "They got nothing, just don't answer the door," he tells his men, but Cole isn't playing anymore, kicking in the door without hesitation. Butch stands quickly, ordering his men to remain calm as he tells one of the goons to call Owl in the other room. The door swings open, and Cole stalks in with a small group of cops at his back. "Where is he?" he demands. Butch just smiles, pointing out that breaking and entering is a crime. Meanwhile, on the roof, Matt crouches, tuning out Cole's questions to Butch and hearing the goon call to Owl. He quickly phones Cole, asking the cop to meet him out front. Cole rushes back outside to find his partner, aiming his pistol at Daredevil, and Matt pulls up his hands, telling them that the girl is actually in a van that is being moved across the city. "I can't get there on foot. If we get close enough, though, I can find them," Matt promises. Cole nods. "Give me the keys, Green," he says, ordering his partner to lower his weapon. Green is shocked as Cole gets in a car with Daredevil. They activate the siren and they peel off into the rainy night, chasing down a kidnapped child. They move through the city with Matt leaning out the window. He has to cut out all the noise of the traffic. He has to cut out the rain. He reaches out with his senses, straining his ears, hitting a new level of his special power. And finally he hears a voice talking about the girl. "I got him! Straight ahead! Maybe 4 blocks!" he shouts to Cole. The detective nods, getting on the radio, ordering them to lock the streets down, and they finally pull over. Traffic is heavy. It's stopped. Matt doesn't hesitate. He jumps out, running through the rain. Up ahead, he can see them. He sees the kidnapped child. The goons in the van see the cops coming. They begin to move. One gets out of the van, beginning to sprint away. Cole sees him coming. He pulls out his pistol, but Matt shouts for him to leave him. They are finally close to the van, with the door kicked open to reveal a thug with his gun to the little girl's face. "Back away!" the thug shouts. The rain pours down as Cole raises his weapon, ordering the man to drop his gun and let the girl go. "Don't make me," he begins to shout, closing his eyes to focus, his hands shaking ever so slightly. But Matt puts out his hand, forcing Cole to lower his weapon. "It's okay," he says with a nod, putting his hands up and walking towards the goon. The man is shouting, but Matt reaches him with his senses. He can hear the man's heart racing, sense his muscles twitching. He gets closer and he reaches out, and he gently takes the weapon from the goon. The man gasps and he falls to his knees. This man is no killer of children, and Matt knows it. He turns, giving a nearby officer the gun, and then he turns back to Cole, telling him that they've got to get back to the kitchen. Those guys are going to talk, and when Owl gets word of this, it's going to be a war in the kitchen. Meanwhile, back at Owl's house, Tom moves through the shadows, putting his pistol to a guard's head. "Take me to him," he snaps. The guard smiles. He knows who Tommy Libris is. He knows that he is the soft member of the Libris crime family. He reaches out, grabbing the gun, twisting and punching Tommy in the face. "Sure thing, bookstore boy. I'll take it to him," guard says as he stands over Tommy. They drag him into the Owl's greenhouse, throwing him on the floor at Owlsy's feet. "Ah, if it isn't Daddy. What a surprise." Owl scoffs. Tommy begins to curse the gangster, but the Owl turns away as his phone buzzes. Finally, he turns back to Tommy. "Well, Mr. Libris, I have some good news for you. It seems that your daughter is safe," he says. Tommy is shocked as the Owl turns away, the gangster telling Tommy that he knows that Izzy got out of the drug business when her oldest son died of an overdose. How would she react to another one of her son's deaths? The cause being her criminal empire, he says as he turns around, shooting Tommy in the face. At his home, Wilson Fisk sits in his bed reading the paper, but he's interrupted when Wesley walks into the room, holding up a phone, telling him that it's the Stromwyms. Fisk answers, and Quinn Stromwym is nothing but polite on the other end of the phone, explaining to Fisk that they feel that he has lost control of the city, of its criminals and its vigilantes. "So we're going to purge it. Start fresh. No hard feelings," Quinn says from his yacht. At the docks, 2 workers turn their heads as a tanker begins to open up, and a knife flies out of the darkness, stabbing one of the workers in the forehead. "Excuse me, which way is Hell's Kitchen?" Bullseye says with an evil smile. The rest of the squad keeps searching for Owl in Hell's Kitchen. Detective Green isn't happy about it, but they decide to start checking the other gangs to see if Owl is hiding somewhere. The Libris kid is safe, which means the Owl is on the run, he says as they begin to walk back to their cars. An explosion suddenly ripping through the streets. The cops turn in shock as the costumed villains stroll down the road. "Boys, let's tear this neighborhood apart," Crossbones laughs as he keeps opening fire. Gunfire beginning to rip through the cops as Green shouts for someone to call it in. Meanwhile, Cole and Matt have reached a roadblock, with the officer telling them that no one is allowed back into the kitchen. Something's wrong. He's nervous. He knows this is a dirty order. Matt whispers to Cole, but Cole's phone buzzes and he answers, his eyes widening as Green is shouting at him over the line, trying to warn him before the line goes dead. Let's go, Matt says as he braces himself, Cole gunning the engine, driving through the roadblock. In his apartment, Hector is looking out at the neighborhood, an explosion ripping through a building a block away, his elderly father complaining about construction, but Hector reaches into his drawer, pulling out his own Daredevil mask. Meanwhile, out on the street, Edmund grabs Sammy, pulling him into a bodega. Bullets ripping through everything around him. They turn back as a woman is trying desperately to pull her baby from a car. Bullets ricocheting all around her. The baby is crying, causing Bullseye to turn his attention to him. Oh, what do we have here? He says with an evil sneer, raising his revolver. God, I hate mothers. I wonder why that is, he says as he takes aim. Sammy rushes out, grabbing the mother, trying to pull her into the store, and Bullseye fires, ricocheting the round off the ground, hitting Sammy in the head. Bullseye smiles, but is knocked out flat as a Daredevil tackles him off the car that he was standing on. He rolls, smiling. Oh, a Daredevil! I love killing those, he says with a grin. Cole whips around a corner into an alleyway, driving fast towards the carnage. Matt shouts for him to turn as his senses catch up, but it's too late and a massive stilt slams in front of the car. Matt is thrown through the window, slamming into the concrete. All right, time for Stiltman to earn escape, Stiltman says to himself as he chucks grenades at a nearby building. The streets are now a war zone. The few police are trying desperately to shoot at the villains, while Crossbones is launching grenades back at them. Bullseye twists, slashing Daredevil across the chest. Look at you! You're legit now! I'm Daredevil's top baddie, he says with a glee. Hector tries to throw a punch, ordering Bullseye to get out of his neighborhood, but Bullseye blocks the blow, stabbing the man in the gut. Quit dogging, we got company! Bullet shouts to Bullseye, motioning towards the group of citizens now all wearing Daredevil masks that are coming towards them. High above, Owl looks down on the carnage, laughing. He turns to his men, telling them that it is glorious, because they can destroy the neighborhood and have all the customers come to them. He leaps off the roof, flying away, laughing with glee. Meanwhile, Cole wakes up covered in small cuts, rubbing his neck. He gets out of the car quickly, checking on Matt, discovering that he's alive, but he doesn't have time to stop. He looks up to see the citizens of Hell's Kitchen trying to fight back, but they are outmatched. One guy tries to hit Crossbones with a bat, but the man grabs it, beating the man. Bullet backhands another man, but turns in time to get punched across the jaw by Cole. Meanwhile, over at the church, Sister Elizabeth is shouting for the people to get inside, and she turns as Rhino pushes over a car walking towards him. Smart. I ain't into smashing churches, or people for that matter, but I'm being paid to destroy everything, so you got 10 minutes to clear the church. He snarls at her. Sister Elizabeth goes inside, fear across her face. She looks at the priest, ignoring his questions, rushing deeper into the church. Meanwhile, across the city, Wilson Fisk looks down, seeing the destruction from his penthouse. Wesley walks up behind him, reporting on it so far. And over with Matt, he wakes up at the car wreck, struggling to his feet, and he stands as someone staggers closer, and Hector falls against him, blood dripping from his wounds. Matt looks up and he can sense the people of Hell's Kitchen trying to help each other. He knows that they are wearing the Daredevil mask, taking back the symbol that he tarnished by giving it up. I tried. Hector coughs at him weakly, and Matt nods, pulling up his mask, telling Hector to hold it against the wound. You did fine. You did good, he says to the dying man, but Hector passes in Matt's arms. Tears fall down Matt's face as he lays Hector on the ground, but now the tears are gone, and determination fills Matt Murdock's body. Meanwhile, back at the church, Elizabeth is lighting candles, telling the father that they only have 10 minutes, but a smile begins to spread across her face as she begins to remember. She remembers who she really is and why she was put here. She was placed here by Wilson Fisk to start a better life, and she laughs and the candles light by themselves. Sister Elizabeth? The father asks as she removes her habit. No, father. Call me Mary, she says with an evil grin as she turns, and Typhoid Mary has returned. Bullseye turns from the fight. He smiles as another Daredevil approaches him. God, really? Is there no end to the fakes? he says as he throws his knife, but Matt moves fast, grabbing it out of the air, striding towards his enemy. Not fake, Lester. Just Daredevil. He snaps. Daredevil, once more. Cole keeps fighting with Bullet as the other citizens try to help him. A billy club flies through the air, slamming into Bullseye's jaw. He flips over a car, moving fast, going towards the marksman and crossbones. Huh? I was told you were dead, he notes as he opens fire, but Daredevil ducks under the gunfire. As he stops, he looks up to see Stiltman bombing more buildings, and he knows that the joke villain is more dangerous now than ever. He turns, running towards him. Maybe you are dead, coward. Crossbones whispers as he reloads, and Stiltman heads towards the church, ignoring Rhino's shouts that the church still has a minute. He lets loose with a grenade, but Daredevil's nightstick flies through the air, detonating the grenade midair. Rhino grunts, turning back to the church, prepared to do his job, but the doors swing open, revealing Typhoid Mary. Big man sent to do a big job, sent to fail, she says with a crazed laugh. Matt looks in shock, surprised that Mary managed to wake up. She waves her hand, flames sprouting on the back of Rhino. I love a good riot, but a place of worship? She asks. Rhino whirls, backhanding her away, and Daredevil moves fast, catching her. My hero, miss me? She asks with a smile. He looks at her for a moment before ordering her to lure Rhino west and try to knock him into the river. Bossy, I'll allow it, she says as she runs off, hitting Rhino with more flames. And with that taken care of, Daredevil leaps into the air, flipping up to Stiltman. The villain tries to hit him with a bomb, but Daredevil avoids it, stabbing Bullseye's knife into the villain's armor. I'll kill you for this! Stiltman shouts as he drops his bomb, but the grenade goes off against his own stilts, destroying them, sending them both plummeting towards the street below. Daredevil steers Stiltman towards a car, crashing into it, taking him out of the fight. He then turns back to see Cole trying to warn him, and he whirls in time to leap over Bullet's head. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Red! Bullet snaps as Crossbone keeps firing at them. A round slices through Daredevil's leg, causing a grunt of pain to escape his lips. And then he whirls as Owl is suddenly there, slashing across his chest. Back to watch the kitchen burn! Owl hisses with a laugh, and Daredevil rolls away, crouching as the villains surround him, his leg and chest on fire. Boys, I think this might be the real deal. Owl says with a smile, and Crossbone nods, taking aim. Sorry, pal. If you ain't the real deal, you still put up a half-decent fight, he says, but he's interrupted as a rock bounces off of his head. They turn to see the citizens of Hell's Kitchen rushing them, some wearing Daredevil masks, all trying to help. Crossbones reaches out, grabbing a man by the throat, lifting him into the air. Get your hands off my citizens! Fisk snarls, his massive fist slamming into Crossbones' face. Daredevil whirls, kicking the Owl in the back until he is back-to-back with Fisk. Keep a lookout for Bullseye, he's MIA, Daredevil tells the mayor, but Fisk just glares at Daredevil over his shoulder. I'm not helping you. This is my city, and anyone who thinks otherwise needs to learn respect, he snaps. They both turn as Rhino comes pounding towards them, still chasing Mary. Hey, Handsome, you need to update your files, because the big man can swim, she shouts with glee. Rhino runs through them, throwing everybody away, and Daredevil hits the ground hard, but manages to roll up. He turns as Foggy comes rushing through the carnage towards them, shouting that they should run, but Matt shakes his head, telling his friend that he can't. Foggy nods, reaching into his bag, pulling out one of Matt's billy clubs. Damn it, Matt! I knew you were gonna say that, he says as Matt smiles at his friend, taking his weapons. He immediately twists and deflects an incoming bullet, and then he turns, stepping in the way of his friend and Bullseye. Run, Foggy! Straight behind me in case he fires again. I've got this, Matt tells him, and he steadies himself, ready for the fight as the mercs surround them. He can sense their movements. He can sense their heartbeats. Crossbones and Bullet are first. He flips between the attacks, kicking them in the head, dropping them both quickly. He then whirls with the knife, using it to block another bullet from Bullseye, destroying the blade. Rhino is then rushing them. He snaps the billy clubs together, pulling them apart to reveal the wire that now connects them. He leaps over Rhino's charge, wrapping the wire around his throat and slamming him into the ground. He then whirls and stuffs the knife's handle into his mouth, blocking Rhino's air and putting him down. Bullseye keeps firing, but Daredevil deflects the rounds all around them, stopping the other mercs from getting back to their feet. Bullseye then runs out of ammo, turning and trying to run away, but Daredevil throws the billy club and turns away, aware that it's coming down and slamming into the back of Lester's head. Calmly then walks towards Rhino, pulling the handle out of his mouth and allowing him to breathe again. Fisk stands amongst the carnage, making sure that all the mercs are down, but Owl is behind him, a pistol in his hand. This is my town now, he shouts. But a gunshot goes off, and the weapon flies from his hand. It's over, Owlsy, Cole shouts, his pistol still aiming at the mobster. Daredevil comes out of the smoke, and Fisk turns to Cole, ordering the detective to arrest the vigilante. News reporters rush forward, asking the mayor what happened and why he stepped in to help. I just did what I always do. I helped my city, Fisk tells her, waving off the questions. She then turns to Daredevil, asking if he's the real one. I am. I'm Daredevil. I've spent years defending Hell's Kitchen. I've also been accused of murdering Leo Carrero, Matt says, staring into the news cameras before him. He pauses for a moment before nodding. Which is why I'm turning myself into the authorities, he says to everyone's shock. The news reporters rush around Daredevil as the wreckage continues to smoke around him. They're shocked at what he just told them. That due to murdering a man by mistake, he was turning himself into the police. Some of the reporters turn to Fisk, asking if the mayor has been working alongside Daredevil during the fight, but Fisk shakes his head, explaining that he was merely fighting for his city. Then he turns to the gathered police. Officers, arrest this man. The cops hesitate, but Cole steps up, ordering them to arrest a real criminal, pointing at the owl. For what? Protecting myself in a superhero war zone? But as he's already being moved away by some of the cops, Izzy Libris pushes through them, accusing Owlsy of the murder of her son, but Owl says, "You have no proof. I placed a recorder in his jacket, then sent the cops to your home. I'm dead and so are you." She shouts at him, bringing a shocked look at Owl's face. Cole continues to stand between Daredevil and the cops, but the hero finally puts his hand on the detective's shoulder. It's okay, Cole. I'm turning myself in, and I think it's only right that you bring me in, he says softly. Cole stares at him for a moment before stepping forward and putting the cuffs on Daredevil, leading him away. A short time later, Cole points his car towards the precinct, but he looks in the mirror, asking how Daredevil is planning on getting away. Daredevil shakes his head. I'm doing this, Cole, and I want you to be the one to bring me to justice. But Cole knows that they'll punish Daredevil severely to send a message. Their conversation is then cut short as a car pulls out in front of them. Cole leaps out of his vehicle, drawing his weapon, but Foggy steps out of the car with his hands up, declaring himself Daredevil's counsel and demanding to speak to his client. Cole nods, giving the lawyer 2 minutes. So Foggy Nelson rushes over to the weapon, speaking in a voice low enough for only Matt to hear. If you turn yourself in, it'll be Matt Murdock going to prison, not Daredevil. You know what will happen if your cover is blown. People you love will die. I know I can't talk you out of this, but I believe I have a better way, he says. Matt pauses, looking at his friend, listening to his ideas. So a short time later, Foggy and Cole walk into the district attorney's office. At first, the man is happy to see Foggy, but not after he hears that he is representing Daredevil. My client will only turn himself in under one condition, Foggy says with determination. Meanwhile, Matt opens up the skylight, dropping down into his apartment. He pauses for a moment, sensing that somebody is nearby. I told you, if you put on the mask again, I'd be back, and I'm taking you in, Spider-Man tells Daredevil. But Daredevil just shakes his head, beginning to pull off his street clothes and head to his uniform locker. You're late. Hell's Kitchen was on fire. I saved it, and I'm already turning myself in. You're too late, Spider-Man, he says as he pulls on his Daredevil costume, and he turns back to Spider-Man, who repeats his warning, but Matt turns around fully dressed, tightening the wraps on his fists. I'm Daredevil, and you're not my moral authority. You put people in the hospital too. Now get out of my house before I call the cops, Spider-Man, he warns, dropping into a fighting stance. Spider-Man stares at him for a moment before heading out of the skylight, warning him that if he's lying, he'll return. Matt slumps after he leaves, not sure if he even had anything left to fight Spider-Man. But the phone buzzes in his pants and he picks it up, hearing Foggy on the other end, confirming the deal. Matt nods and hangs up, heading back to the rooftop, looking out over his city, his neighborhood. He's glad that he gets to end this on his terms, and he leaps off into the night. Daredevil, once more. Later, he finds himself at the DA's office alongside Cole and Foggy. DA buzzes him in, but demands to speak only to Daredevil. So Daredevil walks into the office, thanking the DA for agreeing to this, and the man raises his hand, and he tells Daredevil to stop. He comes out from behind the desk, and he tells Daredevil that his lawyer is good, that since the Supreme Court has ordered that heroes can testify while wearing masks to protect their identity, they should also be allowed to stand trial that way. Daredevil nods, but the DA explains that he doesn't agree with this. He stands before the hero and tells him that he needs to know who is behind that mask. If he reveals his identity, then he'll let it happen. I don't need the system to know, Daredevil, but I won't let you go through with this without knowing who you are. Matt nods, respecting the man's decisions, and he pulls off his mask, revealing his true identity to the man that he once worked for. Anger flashes across the DA's face, and he slaps Matt Murdock. Then, I'm sorry. Matt begins, but the DA is too angry. He knows that if Matt's identity were to get out, all the cases that he worked on would be overturned. Put it back on. I don't even want to look at you, Murdock. He snaps as he calls in the officers waiting outside. Do me a favor and arrest this murderer, he orders the cops. A short time later, Daredevil is being ushered through the police station, his mugshot being taken as he's led to fingerprints, but Foggy steps in, ordering them to stop. The Daredevil's identity is to be kept secret to protect those that he loves. The cops aren't happy about it, but they wave him through without getting his fingerprints. Foggy continues to argue with those around him, but Daredevil stops him, allowing the officers to cuff him so that he can be brought to the arraignment. He's led outside, greeting a sea of reporters, but the officers push through and Matt says nothing. A short time later, he's standing in the court. He's happy with the outcome. The prosecutor is someone that he went to law school with, someone that Foggy always beat. The judge has a strong reason to allow Daredevil out on bail, but she doesn't. The gavel lands, and soon Matt and Foggy find themselves on the roof. Pretty sure that's the first time a defendant asked to leave via rooftop. Foggy jokes, and Matt thanks his friend for his hard work, pulling him into a hug. Foggy is shocked at first, but smiles, patting his friend on the back. It's going to be okay, Matt, he promises, and Matt nods before leaping off the building. I know, and I'm gonna make sure of it, he responds, ignoring Foggy's cries that they need to get to work on their defense, and he sighs, reaching for his phone, asking his legal teammate if she's still on her way from the airport. "'Cause I'm gonna need you." Matt knows that Foggy is right, knows that he needs to get started on their defense, but he also needs to make sure that the Hell's Kitchen will be alright without Daredevil. He finds himself at the docks that night, trying to meet a friend, but the other unsavory characters are at the docks as well, and Daredevil leaps off into a gun deal, his billy club flying out and disarming a goon. He kicks a weapon out of the hand of another as he whirls around with handcuffs, snapping them onto someone's wrist and cuffing them to a buddy's leg. Bringing them both down, he's Daredevil again. He's careful, he's deliberate. He turns to catch another goon's punch, twisting it around so that he can choke him. "You need to be better than this. When you wake up, remember that." He growls into the man's ears, and the man passes out in his hands. So this new Daredevil, motivational speaker? Tony Stark calls from above as he floats down in his Iron Man armor, and he lands nearby, telling Daredevil that he wishes that he had gotten there sooner. "Been a long time since I stopped at old-fashioned crime with a street-level superhero," he says. He tells Daredevil that he called the police and turns to destroy the truck of weapons with a single blast. "Come on, the war's creepy, and you and I are classy men," he says as the two of them turn to go. Elsewhere in the city, Wilson Fisk steps into Mary's church, surprised to find that she hasn't left. Typhoid Mary is sitting at the altar. The father was on his knees nearby, a noose around his neck, as he begs Fisk to help them. "Why would I leave the home you so kindly gave me, Fisk?" Mary asks with a wicked smile. "I'll be honest, I'm a bit more mad at the father than I am at you," she tells him, telling Fisk that the father took the money to help her. "You did it for love," she says as she walks over to the mayor, straightening his tie. She turns, beginning to walk towards the door, telling Wilson Fisk that she isn't sure what happened at the church, but she feels more in control than she has in years. She opens the door and begins to walk out. "I'll be in touch, big man," she calls over her shoulder. But back with Tony Stark, he offers Daredevil a non-alcoholic drink. Daredevil declines. The two talk for a few minutes about what's going to happen and the thoughts behind Daredevil turning himself in. Daredevil finally gets to the point of why he asked to meet with Tony Stark. He wants Tony to buy up Hell's Kitchen from under the Stromwinds. Tony looks at him in shock. "You want me to buy an entire neighborhood to stop other billionaires from doing the same thing?" Daredevil nods, explaining that the Stromwinds are about profit, but if Tony were to buy the neighborhood and rent the buildings to the people cheaply, then eventually sell the buildings to them cheaply, that'll hurt the Stromwinds. "And you want me to lose money on a deal?" Tony asks in even more surprise, pacing around the penthouse. "That's crazy." He turns back to Daredevil, but Daredevil just tells him that it's the right thing to do. They talk for a few more minutes before Tony finally agrees to think about it. Later, back in Wilson Fisk's office, the mayor talks to Izzy Libris on the phone, promising to make sure that the owl will stay behind bars after kidnapping her granddaughter and killing her son. "I propose a meeting in 2 days for everyone. Can I count on you, Izzy?" he asks her. She agrees, and the two hang up. He then turns to Wesley, ordering him to secure the bank for the meeting. and to find his private investors. Matt finally arrives back at Foggy's office, tired from his night's work, slumping into a chair as Foggy yells at him for not helping out with their defense. But Matt tries to explain that he's been trying to make certain securities for if he does go to jail. Foggy calms down and sits at his desk, telling him that the DA is going for first-degree murder. So all they have to do is convince the jury that Daredevil wasn't trying to kill that man, that it was merely an accident when he tried to stop the robbery. Matt pauses and he turns in his chair, sensing someone in the hall. He pulls back on his mask, telling Foggy to get under the desk, but Foggy stands and tells Matt to calm down. He had to call someone to help. She called the second you were arrested. She's the best and you know it. Foggy explains to his friend, but Matt is shocked when he smells her perfume. He can't believe that Foggy would call his ex-girlfriend, as Kirsten McDuffie opens the door with a smile. "Oh good, we're all burning the midnight oil," she says to them. The team begins to go over the defense strategy, with Matt sitting there quietly, thinking about how Kirsten forgot his secret identity when he had the Purple Man's children make the world forget, how he had broken up with her to keep her safe, and how she was the last person that he wanted working on this case. "Are you still with me?" she asks him, waving her hand in front of his face, and he sighs, telling them that he's just tired and thinks that they should call it a night. "We got 8 days. It won't do if we burn out before then," Foggy agrees, beginning to pack up, and Kirsten agrees, but tells them that she'll head back to the hotel to keep working. After she leaves, Daredevil turns to Foggy, demanding to know why he brought Kirsten in. "It broke my heart to leave her," he reminds his friend, but Foggy just gets angry, reminding Matt that Kirsten is the best lawyer that they really know and that they need help. "You need people, Matt!" he shouts at him as he opens a window and leaps into the city. Matt begins to think about how he shouldn't have yelled at Foggy as he keeps moving around the rooftops and finally pauses on a ledge looking down. There he is, the world's stupidest superhero. Electra calls out from behind him as she steps up next to him. "What do you want? I'm not in the mood, Electra," he tells her gruffly, and she once again reminds him about all the people that he won't be able to save if he's locked up. "This is selfishness masquerading as selflessness," she tells him, and Matt just stares at her. "You used me to steal billions of dollars for yourself." He reminds her after a moment, but she shakes her head, telling him that she stole it for them. She explains that the hand is back stronger than ever, and she took the money so that she could fight against them. "And I need you with me. I can't do this alone. It's what Stick trained us for." But Matt shakes his head, reminding her that his neighborhood is in ruins and he's trying to save it. "Go peddle your ancient war somewhere else, Electra," he growls at her. But as he moves to leave, she stops him. "You want to save the kitchen? I know of a meeting tonight." So meanwhile, over at a secret meeting in a bank, Wilson sits in front of the crime bosses of New York, apologizing for thinking that they could work together without greed getting in the way. But Hammerhead interrupts, his wounded skull still bandaged from being shot in the head, demanding to know if he's getting a better deal after this gang war since Izzy shot him. But Wilson grabs his head, slamming it on the table again and again. "Here is the better deal," he says, each word punctuated by Hammerhead's face slamming onto the table. Blood begins to pool as Wilson composes himself and straightens his tie, telling them that they need a kingpin, but he is unable to fill the void due to his duties as mayor. He finally looks to Izzy Libris and names her the new kingpin of New York. "Wilson, it would be an honor," she says. The meeting is then interrupted as the vault door explodes off of its hinges, and from the smoke steps Daredevil. "Old Kingpin, new Kingpin, I'll topple you all," he says as he steps forward, and Fisk steps up to him, telling Daredevil that destruction of property won't look good for his cause. But Daredevil ignores him, surveying the mob bosses. "I'm here to let you all know I'm listening, I'm watching, even from prison, and I'm going to make your lives hell," he says, stepping forward, looking up at Wilson. But one of them points out that he won't be able to do anything from jail, that the new Kingpin will run free with no fear of Daredevil. Maybe, but it's not just me, Daredevil says, motioning over his shoulder towards Spider-Man, who's been surveying them all from the shadows. Wordless, Daredevil promises that he is coming for them all, throwing down a flashbang and disappearing in surprise. Soon, on the nearby rooftop, "Do you think that'll work? I mean, I tried to be all dark and menacing," Spider-Man tells Daredevil. "Yeah, I think it helps. Plus, you tearing the vault door off its hinges probably spooked them." But Spider-Man still doesn't understand why Daredevil reached out to him, knowing that their relationship hasn't been the best lately. But Matt admits that if he's going away, he doesn't want him and Spider-Man to be on the ropes. "You're a good man, and I don't want to go to prison without making things right between us." Spider-Man tells Daredevil that the reason he was hard on him is because he had killed someone once, and it felt like he shouldn't have gone unpunished. The two heroes hug it out, and they spend some time talking about the stress and issues that their lives bring. The next morning, Daredevil heads back to Foggy's office, but as he's walking down the hallway, his heightened senses catch someone's voice, someone's heartbeat, someone that he can't believe that Foggy would also bring in. He opens the door to find Kirsten, who smiles at him and tells him that they have the dream team all together. Matt Murdock's on board, she says, motioning to the blind lawyer sitting behind the desk. And Matt Murdock responds to Daredevil, Kirsten, and Foggy with, "Hell yeah." Later, Matt and Foggy stand on the rooftop, with Matt demanding to know why Foggy would bring in his twin brother Mike to act like Matt Murdock. "I was painted into a corner. Kirsten, she was asking about you and I panicked. I just thought..." But Matt interrupts him, telling him that he just made more problems, asking what Foggy told Mike. "I told him you were in rehab, that you didn't want anyone to know because it would hurt your career," Foggy says with a sigh. Anger fills Matt as he pulls back on his mask, leaping off into the night. "Matt, we still have work to do!" Foggy shouts after his friend, and over in his penthouse shower, Fisk tells Wesley that he wants to be at Daredevil's trial, that he wants to make sure that the vigilante is brought to justice, but Wesley doesn't answer him and Fisk turns around in surprise. "I sent him to get coffee. Told him I'd be on towel duty today," Mary says with an evil smile, and Fisk steps out, careful as he takes the towel from her hands, wrapping it around his waist. Mary smiles, telling him that they both have a chance at a new life, and she puts a hand on his shoulder, telling him that if he plans on going to that trial, he's going to need a bodyguard. "I already have a bodyguard," he tells her gently, but as she steps around the corner, she allows the unconscious bodyguard to fall to the ground. "You actually don't," she tells him. Meanwhile, back at his apartment, Matt steps out of the shower, walking across the darkened room to pick up his phone and call Tony. "Is this the devil?" Mock fear in his voice, and the two talk, with Tony Stark confirming to Matt that he's preparing to make a bid on all of the properties in Hell's Kitchen. "Good. That makes what I have to do next a lot easier," he tells him, and he hangs up the phone. He gets dressed and he heads over to the prosecutor's office as Matt Murdock and sits down with Goldie, an old friend from law school, telling him that he's working on the Daredevil defense team and that Daredevil would like a deal. Later that night, Daredevil moves along the rooftops, stopping as his phone begins to buzz, and he answers it to hear Tony's voice on the other side. The billionaire superhero in shock because he was outbid at Hell's Kitchen. "It was the shell company. We're trying to find the owners right now," Tony's telling Matt, his team scrambling behind him, and he apologizes, but Daredevil hangs up on him in shock, not sure what to do as he stares down at the neighborhood. His plan is a wash. Who bought Hell's Kitchen? The next day, Daredevil is dressed in a suit with his mask as Kirsten picks him up and he gets into the car. He looks out the window at his city as they drive, and he finally turns to her, thanking her for everything that she's done and apologizing for not being fully involved. He tells her that while he believes that he should be punished for what he's done, he's not sure that he can leave Hell's Kitchen behind, that he's not sure anyone else can keep it safe like the Daredevil. "I need to fight this now. I know that. I need to be out there keeping people safe," he says, and she smiles, putting a hand on him. "I'm glad you finally have come around to fight this," she says as they arrive at the courthouse. "Now chin up, Mr. Devil. We've got a walk to do," she says as they both step out of the car and they walk through the sea of reporters and prosecutors. They head inside of the courtroom, which has gathered some of Daredevil's closest friends, allies, and enemies, and Electra stands in the back, quietly watching as he steps through. The court begins and she whispers, something just loud enough for Daredevil to hear. Something that changes everything. "I bought it. All of it. Your home, your hell. I don't understand you. I never did. But do what you need to do. Make your foolish sacrifice. Hell's Kitchen is safe, Matthew," she says, and relief floods through Matt Murdock as he only stops to realize that she has learned his identity for a moment before he focuses on what's going on around him. The judge looks at him, explaining that the defendant has agreed to a deal with the DA, and Foggy looks shocked. Kirsten explaining that Daredevil won't take the deal, but Daredevil stops her. He interrupts. "Hell's Kitchen is safe, Your Honor. I've reconsidered. I accept their deal." His team looks at him in shock, including Kirsten, who he just told differently in the car. "I plead guilty to second-degree manslaughter," Daredevil says to everyone's surprise. A few days pass and Electra slips out of the shadows, her arm wrapping around the prison guard's throat, pulling tight until he passes out. She slips inside of the cell block, ignoring the catcalls as she walks towards the cell that she needs. She opens the door to find Daredevil sitting on his bunk. "Electra, you better not have," he begins, but she stops him and explains that she did not kill anyone. "I know you frown on such things," she says, waving him off, and she walks in, telling Matt that she is surprised that he went through with his act. "It was the right thing to do, and you helped make it possible. by saving Hell's Kitchen from the Stromwims. He tells her and she sits down on the bunk, asking him once again how many lives will be lost or ruined while he punishes himself in prison. But he shakes his head, telling her that he is an example. It'll make the other vigilantes better. It'll make the careless ones careful. He tells her and he finally glances at her, asking how she knows his identity again. It doesn't matter, she says, standing up. But before she leaves, he asks her why she did it. Why did she help him? They step out of the cell, leaning against the railing. Do you ever get tired of the darkness? She asks him, but he shakes his head, telling her that he lives in a world of darkness. God gave me darkness so I could better understand the light. What's going on with you, Electra? He asks her again, but she explains that she found something. That she and Stick found a Temple of Hand and discovered a book. And it was like an instruction manual on how to defeat the hand. They had a counter for thousands of years. The hand is in the darkness, the fist is in the light, she says, stepping up, putting her hand to his cheek. But the fist requires a king and a queen, she says gently. Daredevil shakes his head, turning back to his cell. Of course they do. Not interested. He tells her simply, but she gets angry at him, reminding him that he wanted to strike higher than just the street. This is what you've been looking for, she snaps at him. This is the ceiling. There's nothing higher, she tells him, but he turns back, telling her that he doesn't trust her. You use people. You're tired of the darkness? You want to work in the light? Prove it, he says as he shuts his cell door, climbing back onto his bunk. She storms away. She storms out of the prison. Meanwhile, a van peels around the corner, chased by a nearby squad car. The back door opens and the goons open fire, spraying bullets without care for where they go. Electra leaps through the air, kicking through the front window, taking out the driver. She keeps moving, kicking the passenger out the door as she grabs the wheel, twisting it hard, avoiding the two pedestrians that have been in the way. The car hits a curb, flipping over, skidding along on its side. And Electra pulls herself out of the cab, groaning in pain. She climbs up, moving quickly along the van as the remaining goon continues to open fire on the police. She pulls out her sai, now blunt on the end, the way Matt would approve of, and she throws it, cracking the thug in the head and knocking him out. Police look up at her. Her new costume, her new mask. Who are you? They ask in surprise. I'm Daredevil, she tells them defiantly. Daredevil can hear them. He sits quietly in general population in the local prison system, unable to let them know that he is blind. So he turns away books and television, and instead, he sits listening to the stories of those trapped behind the bars with them. You're creeping me out, man, a voice calls out to him, and he turns as a large man walks towards him. Marcus waves around, informing him that just sitting around and staring at everyone is making them uncomfortable, that they already don't like him since his kind put most of them in there. Daredevil apologizes and stands to head towards his cell. Don't worry, you'll be out of here soon, Marcus tells him, and Daredevil tries to argue, tries to explain that he deserves to be there, but Marcus shakes his head. You serving your full term is a fantasy. But the conversation is cut short as the guards arrive, informing Daredevil that the warden wants to see him. With that, he's brought into the man's office and stands before his desk. And the warden introduces himself. But Daredevil already knows who he is. Took down his son when he was acting as the villain known as Crime Wave. The warden waves it off, informing him that he holds no ill towards the hero for taking down his son. My son was hurting people and needed to be brought to justice. Just like you, the warden tells him with a slight smile. But Daredevil can sense the change in his heartbeat. Daredevil's eyes widen slightly then as he realizes that Marcus was wrong. The only way that he's going to be getting out of this prison is in a body bag. In the city, Electra stands on a rooftop, surveying her neighborhood, as she is now the owner of all of Hell's Kitchen. Her eyes are drawn skyward as an alien screech fills the night, and she looks up to see a massive black dragon descending out of the sky, heading towards a group of people. At the fundraiser, Mayor Fisk is pulled away from a group of people by Wesley, who informs them that the event that they had been warned about has begun. The King in Black is conquering New York City as they speak, and the Avengers are working hard to remove the threat. But there are venomous black dragons flying through the sky. With that, they rush outside towards their limo. Typhoid Mary is still acting as Wilson's bodyguard, but another black dragon symbiote roars down upon them, its symbiotic back opening up to unleash Null's army upon the city. The guards open fire and Mary leaps into the fray. "Get him out of here, Wesley!" she shouts as she draws her swords. Fisk trying to shout as he reaches for Typhoid Mary. Gunfire erupting all around them as his guards begin to fall, but the car begins to pull away as the black tendrils begin to wrap around her, and the voices begin as Null speaks to her. What if Daredevil had venom? Meanwhile, in his cell, Matt awakens, sensing something in the prison. He pulls on his mask, heading towards the cell door, shouting for the guards. "Something's in the prison!" he shouts, and they turn in fear as the black goo appears on the floor. They open fire, but the rounds do nothing. The guards and the prisoners are quickly overtaken. "Let me out! I can help! They'll kill you!" Matt shouts at them. Meanwhile, over in Hell's Kitchen, 16-year-old Annie storms out of the bar that she was hiding in when her foster mother found her. She doesn't want to listen and feels that her foster mother doesn't care about her. But as she storms out onto the streets, the creatures attack. She falls back as one of the monsters grabs her mother, the tendrils taking over her body and her mind. "Alice!" she hisses as she is now consumed by the symbiote. "Don't go, my love, I have such plans!" She growls at her, and Alice turns running in fear, but the monster that was her mother catches her, pulling her in close, offering her the love of Null, the King in Black. And Daredevil is there, cracking the monster across the jaw, knocking her back. Electra asks if she's there. "Can you run, girl?" And she pulls Alice to her feet, pushing her further down the alleyway, ordering her to hide amongst the garbage to hide her scent. With that, Electra keeps moving, knowing that she needs to stop this monster and help the others. She quickly finds an abandoned car driving forward, slamming the woman into the wall. Meanwhile, back in the prison, Matt yells out, "Damn it, listen to me!" Still trying to get the guards to release him. When one finally does, his hand shakes as he gets the keys to the lock, and one of the symbiotes snarls behind him. "Who defies our Lord Null?" "I do," Matt says, as he leaps to the banister, dropping amongst them, grabbing a nightstick, twirls it around, throwing it into one of the monster's heads, knowing that he is way out of his depth. Daredevil doesn't fight symbiotes. Back over in Hell's Kitchen, the neighborhood is a war zone as Electra and Alice are dashing through the streets, still being chased by Alice's mother. The girl stumbles and Electra turns back to her. She draws out her blunted size, promising the girl will not die as she turns to face the mother. "Pardon me, but Typhoid Mary would like a word with the Daredevil," Mary shouts as she leaps amongst them, her face twisted by the symbiote that she is bonded with, her laughter echoing throughout the streets. Back over in the prison, Matt keeps fighting, leaping and kicking amongst the monsters, but it isn't enough. The goo wraps around his body as one of his punches connects. It consumes him, and he hears the voice of Null. "I am Null. It is time." The Dark God growls. Matt tries to fight, but Null begins to bond with him. "You are a man without fear, and I am pure power. As one, we are unstoppable," Null says to him, his face coming out of the symbiote that is bonded with Matt Murdock. Back over in Hell's Kitchen, Mary twists her head around, staring at Electra as Daredevil, who stands to protect Alice from both monsters. "I'll kill you both, but only one of you is on my list, Daredevil," she hisses, but Alice's mother steps in the way, knowing that Null deserves servants, and attacks Mary. Alice begins to ask a question to Daredevil, but she turns, pushing the girl away. "Shut up and run!" Electra yells at her, and they keep moving through the construction zone. Electra pushes the girl forward, ordering her to hide in the nearby building. "I'm gonna make sure nobody follows," Electra says as she pulls out her grappling hook and leaps up onto the construction equipment. Meanwhile, over in the prison, Matt keeps fighting, pushing Null's influence out of himself, using his faith in God to fight this devil within him. He roars in anger as he gets control of his body again, beginning to fight the others that have been taken over by the symbiotes. But one of them tears off a cell door, throwing it at Matt, but he leaps over it and redirects it at another monster. As he continues to fight, another sneaks up behind him, stunning him with a loose electrical wire. Back over in Hell's Kitchen, Mary calls out, "Daredevil, come out and play!" as she claws her way into the construction site. But she stops, looking up as Electra comes swinging down on a crane, slamming a steel support into the woman, throwing her into the wall. She stops to take a breath and looks up as she hears Alice scream from the nearby building. Electra begins to run towards that scream, cursing her for not letting the girl keep running. She flips up through the construction zone, finally arriving at where Alice's mother is holding her up, promising that Null will be with them soon if she just lets a symbiote take her. then Alice and her mother will be together forever. Electra draws her sigh, wondering how she's supposed to stop this monster. How would Matt possibly stop a symbiote? But glass shatters as Mary comes flying into the window, her blades slicing through the mother's chest, killing her. Electra moves forward, her fists slashing out, slamming into Typhoid Mary, consumed by a symbiote. "Run, girl! She wants me!" Electra shouts to Alice. Back over in the prison, Matt whirls around, knocking the symbiotes out, defeating them. The guards open fire on him, their guns doing nothing as Matt grabs them, slapping them away. "Daredevil, you idiot, just go!" Marcus shouts as he comes out of his cell, motioning to the hole in the wall that the monsters created. But Matt snaps out of his rage, his mind suddenly starting to work again. He stomps into another room, finding an old electric chair just sitting there, and he smashes through the window, strapping himself in, fitting the helmet to his head. He reaches out with a tendril, trying to pull the lever to activate the device, but he can't control the symbiote anymore. In his mind, all he can see is Null striding towards him, about to completely consume Matt Murdock. "No one can fight forever, except those who live forever." Null smiles at him, that twisted and dark smile. But Marcus is in the room. He pauses as he stares at Daredevil in shock for a moment. The monster smiles at him, and Marcus pulls the lever. Electricity surging through the symbiote, ripping it apart and freeing Matt Murdock, who falls to the floor. "Forever is easy, if you have faith," Matt whispers as Marcus runs over to him. Back with Electra, Mary throws her through a wall, but she rolls up quickly, blood leaking from several wounds as she wonders how Matt would even do this. How he just punches until the monsters fall. And that's when she realizes she can't do that. She isn't Matt. She needs to think like Electra. She stops as Mary rushes at her again, slamming into her, throwing her out the window. And then Daredevil plummets to the ground, slamming hard into a car. She doesn't move, and Mary leaps down, standing over Electra as Daredevil, breathing her in. "No breath, no life. I did it for Wilson!" Typhoid Mary growls, and with her work done, she leaps off into the night to do more of Null's bidding. From the darkness, Alice moves towards the lifeless body of Electra, not knowing what to do. But Electra sits up with a gasp, scaring the girl. "How?" Alice asks, and Electra shakes off the glass and the blood, explaining that Mary needed her to die. So she stopped her breathing in her heart and gave Mary what she wanted. The girl begins to cry as she rushes forward, hugging this new Daredevil. "I'm sorry," she whispers to her. With the darkness of Null's invasion having passed, the city is bright once more, bathed in sunlight. Electra stands in a penthouse apartment, her fists connecting hard against her punching bag. And she stops to check on Alice, the girl that she saved from the symbiotes. She finds her still curled up in bed. At the hospital, Wilson checks on Typhoid Mary, whose eyes are still closed in bed now that the symbiote is gone. And over in prison, Kirsten McDuffie checks on her client, shocked to find Daredevil beat up from his ordeal with the symbiotes. Electra pulls the blanket up on Alice. She doesn't know how to take care of a weak person, someone who was never taught. And while this is going on, Wilson tells Mary that she isn't alone, sitting on her bed, his hand reaching for her, but he pulls it back. Meanwhile, Daredevil tells Kirsten that he's fine, just tired. She's still angry with him, mad that he pushed aside everything that they did and got himself thrown in prison. "I'm sorry, I'm angry. I just need to know, what are you doing here?" she finally asks. Later, as Matt sits alone in the cafeteria, a nervous inmate comes strolling over, trying to sit down to become friends with the vigilante. And Matt recognizes him as a man who committed a double homicide. But their conversation is interrupted as the guards come over. "Time to see Doc Ace," he tells him. Daredevil stands and is led away, quickly finding himself sitting across from the prison psychiatrist. "Are you okay?" she starts by asking him, pointing out that he took a beating when the symbiotes invaded the prison. But Matt tells her that he'll heal and doesn't require any therapy. "If you're sitting across from me, I beg to differ," she says, shaking her head. She explains that he should have seen a shrink on the outside, but she knows that he's here trying to prove something, that he wants to be seen as an equal in a place of inequality. "I live by the world of laws. I broke them. I'm not above this," he tells her, and she stares at him for a moment. "Only when it suits you." And then she lets out a sigh. "You're here, and I'll help. You have my word," she says as she turns to her computer. "I'm okay," he tells her again, but she schedules him anyway. "You're not," she says again. He's led back to Gen Pop and begins to move through the prison when he stops, turning his head He can sense the fight, the impact of the blows coming out of the shower. He moves quickly to find 3 men surrounding the nervous murderer who tried to sit with him, tried to be his friend. Hey! He barks at them, getting the men's attention. Neil needs protecting. We do that. Looked to me today like he was trying to get some free protection. The leader hisses at Matt. He's among them, quickly twisting, kicking one of them in the face while knocking away the shiv from the other. The big one slams into the wall, holding him steady while the other one punches him. But Matt is mad, wrapping his legs around one, twisting him through the air, throwing the big man to the ground, elbowing him in the face. The guards rush in and Matt quickly drops to his knees, putting his hands over his head. And that night he lays there, maskless in the bunker, tired. He can't sleep due to all the sounds in the prison. The quiet sobs, the nightmares, the sound of the warden ordering the guards not to protect him. And he finally falls asleep to that knowledge. Hey, Daredevil! A voice calls out, waking him up, and Matt sits up fast, pulling on his mask, and the guard is staring at him. I don't care who you are, buddy. Get dressed. Doc Hayes wants to see you. Matt stands in her office for a short time, with the doctor asking about yesterday's events, but Matt shrugs it off. That man you helped, Neil Rivat, he was found dead in his cell this morning. She finally tells him. Matt is shocked by this news, his body slumping as he leans against the wall. She tells him that it was suicide. But he shouldn't blame himself, since it was Spider-Man who put him into this prison. But tears begin to fall from Matt's eyes, because he was the one who prosecuted Neil. Are you? Doc Hayes begins to ask, and Matt turns to her. No, Doc, I'm not. Meanwhile, Wilson is standing in the hospital, having spent the last 3 days by Mary's side as she's recovering. Wesley finally finds him, and once there, Wilson looks at his aide, explaining that he is sick of being made to look weak, that his battle against the Stromwims and the aliens from heavens have given him a new perspective. He turns to walk out of the hospital. Let's go kill a Daredevil. Both of them, he growls. And back at her apartment, Electra, as the new Daredevil, brings Alice some food, leaving it on the nightstand for the girl. She's still curled up, though, talking about how everything was her fault, how if she hadn't run off, her foster mother wouldn't have been on the street and been taken over by the symbiotes. Shut up, Electra tells her simply. And Alice looks up at her in shock as Electra explains that she doesn't have time or the stomach for her sympathy. She heads for the door. You're sad now. You'll move past that and be angry soon. And when you're finally angry, meet me in the gym, she says. Meanwhile, over in the prison, Marcus sits across from Matt. Heard about Neil. Sucks, he says with a sigh, and Matt nods, taking a bite of his food. Marcus just keeps staring at him. What was he to you? Because you look like death. You okay, man? But Matt looks up, his eyes widening as he puts down his spoon. No, Marcus. I've just been poisoned. Marcus doesn't understand what he just heard as Daredevil gets to his feet, promising to take care of it. He keeps moving, not knowing how long the poison will take to affect him, but he's already becoming dizzy. He stumbles into a guard. Need some air, he gasps, and the guard nods, helping him outside. Just what the doctor ordered. He chuckles as Matt stumbles into the pouring rain, forcing his body to throw up whatever poison hasn't gotten into his system yet. But as he looks up, he realizes that the guard isn't with him anymore, and a large group of inmates march across the grounds towards him. Back in the penthouse, Alice blocks another of Electra's blows, grunting in pain. You need to pivot and deflect attacks. Let your opponent's momentum do the work, Electra corrects her. Demonstrating the lesson, Alice nods, asking why Electra is helping her, but the woman sighs, explaining that she lost her family. That she was once a weak child as well, but she was taught. She learned. She explains to Alice that there will always be someone stronger than her in the world. Let me show you what I mean in Hell's Kitchen, she says, reaching for her Daredevil costume. Shortly, they stand on the rooftop watching as 2 thugs extort protection money from a convenience store owner. The strong are taking from the weak, Electra explains, telling Alice that Izzy Libris requires businesses to pay her for protection. The strong are meant to protect them from the useless and the corrupt. She hisses, leaping into the night air, landing on a nearby car as 2 goons come outside. It's the first of the month, gentlemen. Pay up, she calls to them, and the 2 laugh, making snide comments about the female Daredevil. But she throws her aside, breaking one of their noses, and the other pulls out a pistol, firing a shot, but she deflects it back at him as he cries out in pain. You shot me! He shouts in anger, and she steps off the car, walking towards him. You shot you. I'm here to let you know that this is Daredevil's territory, she says, punching him hard in the jaw. She reaches into his pocket, pulling out the money that the shop owner had given him. And you'll have to pay me a security fee, 30 grand a month to exist safely in the kitchen. she says, handing the money back to the shop owner. With her job complete, she walks over to where Alice was climbing down the fire escape from their rooftop. It's your choice, girl. Do you want to be strong? Or, like the rest of these people, are you content with being saved? Back over in the prison, Matt pauses as the prisoners get close. He needs to purge the rest of the poison from his body. So, with the death literally walking towards him, he begins to meditate in the rain, using the techniques that Stick taught him. And the prisoners stop staring at him in shock. This is what Matt wanted. He wanted them to pause, to give him the time that he needs. One kicks out, Matt catching it, throwing the guy off balance, and the rest attack him. A cluster of kicks and punches as he fights through it. Back at Izzy's office, she orders the goon out of her office after he tells her what happened with the new Daredevil. She sighs, knowing that she doesn't have time to deal with this and can't wait for Fisk to do something. So, she turns to Butch, the former employee of the Owl who turned the Owl's goons against him and now runs the show. She trusts this man, believing that he wants to do what's right, and she pours him a glass of whiskey, offering to make him the new crime boss of Hell's Kitchen. Later on, Mike Murdoch walks through the door of Butch's gym, still under the guise of pretending to be Matt Murdoch. Butch leads Mike into the back room, explaining everything that Izzy said to him, and the two friends are ecstatic, believing that all of their plans are finally coming true. Back over at Ravencroft Institute, though, the head doctor leads Fisk and Wesley into the bowels of the asylum where they find a secret lab, as Fisk reminds the doctor that he's poured a lot of money into Ravencroft. You owe me, Fisk reminds him, and the doctor nods, fixing his glasses as the lab doors slide open. Of course, we've already begun our work on your Mr. John Doe, he says, motioning to the man who is suspended in the lab equipment. Fisk stares up at him, his face quite passive. His name is Bullseye, he says quietly, and Wesley explains that Bullseye is in good health, and it seems that the fight at Hell's Kitchen has put him off his game and made him insecure. Excellent. Perhaps this will finally give me a bullseye that I can control. And back with Matt, he is roaring in anger and pain as he punches out another inmate, dropping him into the mud as the rain pours around them, and he turns as he hears the approach of the last of the thugs. Was a good show, pal. Just not enough. The man smirks, cracking his knuckles, hitting Matt hard, cracking two of his ribs. He stumbles into the workout equipment, but he refuses to go down. He grabs the weights, throwing them at the man, destroying his kneecap, and the man falls into the mud, screaming in pain. Matt stumbles forward, but he senses someone else moving, one of the thugs rolling up, a shiv in his hand. Matt punches him, but not before he is stabbed in the gut, and as he falls into the mud, the blood pools with the water around him, and Matt senses the warden watching him from his office, and he hears him speaking to someone on the phone. It's done. Daredevil's dead. Daredevil shakingly wakes up in the hospital with Kirsten McDuffie calling his name. You dummy! If you wanted a day pass out of prison, you should have just talked to me, she tells him, sitting on the edge of his hospital bed. I'll remember that next time, he tells her, his voice still weak. And the doors open as Foggy and Cole walk in, both telling Daredevil how dumb he is. I've already covered that, Kirsten tells them, but Foggy is still angry as he points at Matt. Trust me, he can't hear it enough, he snaps. But Cole introduces the fourth person that they've brought, an FBI agent who is looking into the prison workers that have gone missing, and she believes that if Daredevil helps them get the information, she can get his sentence commuted and get him out of the prison. But Matt looks away. I'll do it, I'll help you. But I'm serving my full term, he tells the group, and everyone looks at him in shock with Foggy shaking his head. Back in the city, Alice keeps running, leaping to the next rooftop as Electra chases her, but as Electra lands, she twists, blocking Alice's attack, reminding her that she needs to be quiet. She then twists, tripping and knocking the girl to the ground. I almost had you, Alice says with a smile, as Electra helps her up. Electra's phone buzzing as she checks it, explaining that she has been paying the local informants to help her around Hell's Kitchen. The movement of the kitchen's new boss, Butch Ferris, she says as she looks at Alice. Are you ready for some action? Meanwhile, Typhoid Mary comes walking into Fisk's penthouse, surprised to find the mayor has dinner prepared for the both of them. She sits down, appreciating everything that he has done for her, but she points out that both of them have hurt each other. We've hurt each other, yes, but we've saved each other as well, he says, reaching for his wine glass, raising it to her. I'm hoping that we can forgive each other and talk of the future. That night, a line waits outside the warehouse that has been converted into a club. Daredevil strides up, a masked Alice at her side. The doorman looks at her in shock as she steps up. Let us in, she says simply, and he stares at her, questioning why he would do that. Because my name is Electra, and I own the building, she says as she pulls down her mask. He opens the door, asking why she wouldn't keep her identity a secret. Neither of my identities have anything to fear. They create fear, she tells him as she walks into the club, moving through the swirling music and dancing bodies, heading for the VIP area into Butch. Electra motions Alice away, ordering her to stay close but not draw attention. But the guards try to stop her, and Butch waves Electra in. I'm sure the Daredevil just wants to talk, he says with a smile as he holds up his champagne glass, standing, telling her that she has been a real problem for them. But it also turns out you've been a gift, revealing that he has already gotten word from the front door about her identity. The two get into a quick argument about whether the illegal activities that Butch provides are wrong or just him helping the people express their freedoms, but Electra disagrees, believing that he is merely preying on people's weaknesses and vices. But Butch smiles, telling her that he has learned that to win in the streets, you need the people on your side. She turns as a giant with a ninja sword attacks her from behind, throwing her down onto the dance floor. The club goers scatter as they continue to fight, with Electra throwing her side to try and disable the man, but he moves without feeling it, attacking her several times with his sword. She moves fast, hitting him across the face with her weapons before disarming him, and Alice calls out to her, getting the attention of one of the guards. He attacks her quickly, knocking her to the ground, but Electra kicks out again, but the giant is too fast, avoiding her kick, punching her hard in the face, drawing blood. She moves again, hammering him with blows. It'd be easier if I could just gut him. Matt and his infantile rules, she curses to herself, another blow knocking her off her feet. The monster grabbing her by the throat, lifting her into the air, crushing the life out of her. But then the room is filled with a gunshot. Alice stands there with the guard's smoking gun in her hands, and the big monster falls over as the round hits his stomach. Electra rushes over to her, grabbing her as Alice faints from the excitement. She looks back at the giant, but finds the green smoke escapes from the empty pile of clothes. She narrows her eyes, realizing what she just battled. The hand, she hisses to herself. But back at the penthouse, Fisk is working out with his personal trainer, finally feeling like his life is back on track when they're interrupted as Wesley walks into the room, fear crossing his face as he tells Fisk that they have a situation, handing him the phone. I'm sorry, Willie, but the doctor's very much out of it. Bullseye laughs as he stands amongst the lab of Ravencroft, thanking Fisk for his experiments, letting him work. And with that, Bullseye is free on the city again. Matt leans back in his cell, clutching his side, the spot where the knife entered his body. He had been returned to the prison, and his fight with the other prisoners is giving him some sort of street cred, which he hoped to use to help him find out how the warden has been getting people killed. Marcus and Trevor step in front of his cell, asking him if he wants to go play cards, but Matt turns them down, wishing to be alone. Marcus ushers him out, pointing out that if he keeps hiding, the prisoners that are afraid of him might rethink that. But their conversation is interrupted by another guard, who motions for Daredevil to follow him. Warden Hollis wants to see Mr. Mask here. Meanwhile, back at her apartment, Electra continues to lecture Alice, who is sitting sulkingly. Enough of this, Electra snaps, throwing the young girl boxing gloves and beginning to pull on her own. You've fallen off the proverbial horse. It's time to get back up, she says simply. But Alice is shocked, pointing out that she shot a man last night. No, you didn't. He was a member of the Hand. He was already dead. That's why he turned to dust, Electra reminds her. But Alice has had enough, storming out of the office. Electra stares at her, sick of Alice's weakness. She just wants to punch someone. Elsewhere in the city, a bag is pulled off of Mike Murdoch's head, the brother of Matt Murdoch. He smiles at the gathering mob bosses before him, still pretending to be his blind brother Matt. The mobsters aren't too happy to see him, and Mike quickly gets to the point, pretending to still be Matt Murdoch as he tells them that there are people in the DA's office who are interested in ousting the new Kingpin of New York, Izzy Libris. That if the mobsters decide to have a bloodless coup, the DA will not pursue any of them. Hammerhead seems angry about this, grabbing Mike, throwing him to the ground, and Mike quickly glances at his partner, but Butch doesn't let on that they're the ones doing the secret plotting. Meanwhile, Electra is moving through the city, smashing through mobsters like they're kindling. She's done playing nice, tired of trying to be like Matt, and she finally slams a guy into the wall, choking him from behind. Where is Izzy Libris? She snarls into his ear. Over at the police commissioner's office, Wilson Fisk, the current mayor of New York, is demanding to know, where is Bullseye? Questioning why the police have not found the missing supervillain yet. He grabs the cop, pushing him against the wall, his finger tightening around his face. 2 officers raising their weapons, aiming them at the mayor. Fisk glances over his shoulder at them. By the time you pull the triggers, my palms will be wet with the commissioner's brains and yours. Fisk begins to state, motioning over their shoulders to where Typhoid Mary is lowering her swords to their necks. And the dead cops here, they're the ones that tried to kill the mayor, she finishes. And Misk turns it back to the commissioner, once again demanding that he find Bullseye. Back over with Matt Murdock in the prison, he steps into the warden's office with the man pointing out that Daredevil has been at the center of 3 assaults. You're trying to kill me, Matt calls out the warden simply. The warden looks shocked, wondering, do you have any proof? Shut up, Daredevil tells him simply. The guards are shocked, pulling out their batons. But Matt moves quickly, grabbing one nightstick, smashing a guard across the face. He whirls back, knocking away a pistol from the other guard who reaches for it. And as the warden reaches for his panic button, Matt turns again, throwing the nightstick, shattering the call box. He grabs the remaining guard, choking him until he falls unconscious on the floor. What? Did you think I would treat you differently than the prisoners you sent after me? Daredevil asks, grabbing the warden by the throat, pushing him against the window. You're garbage! I know you're hiding something, Warden, and I don't care who you are or what your job is. I'm going to destroy you. He releases the warden, turning and walking back to the center of the room, a smile playing across Daredevil's face as he orders the warden to scream for help. The warden begins to shriek for the other guards, and Daredevil continues to smile, dropping to his knees, putting his hands up. Back over with the Kingpin, Izzy Libra stares out her window, whirling as gunshots echo throughout her penthouse. She moves for the gun that she keeps at the desk, but Electra comes kicking through the door, throwing her side, knocking the weapon away. The Hand, Electra demands, and Izzy covers her face, revealing that the Hand, the evil ninja organization that Electra has been hunting, offered to bring her sons back from the dead, that Izzy just needed to provide them with Electra. I know I shouldn't have dealt with them. I've been around long enough to know what evil feels like, Izzy whispers to her, and Electra nods. If you made a deal with the Hand, you're as good as dead. I want them gone, and you want them gone. Send me a word when you know what their next move is, and I might not kill your surviving son, Electra tells her, walking out of the office with Izzy breaking down behind her, crying about how tired of all of this she is. Wilson Fisk said he would take care of this. His big plan was to give me a psychopath to take care of you, Izzy gasps, pointing at Electra, who stops at the edge of the room, looking over her shoulder. What psychopath? Bullseye, meanwhile, fires again, watching another person on the street drop, and he smiles. 7. Let's see, by my count, that means 1,663,993 to go, Manhattan! 8 days pass with Bullseye killing everyone he can find on the streets. The whole city goes on lockdown, and the police are beginning to ask everyone to stay indoors, to draw their curtains, to hide from Bullseye. Electra drops into the streets, finding another body. His body count is up to 39 according to the old newspapers. In a secure location, Typhoid Mary straps on her swords, preparing to head out into the city to hunt Bullseye down. But Fisk grabs her arm, informing the woman that she needs to stay. Mary stares at his hand for a moment before he removes it. We're not doing this again, trying to possess each other. If you want me to stay, ask. Fisk looks away. Will you stay, Mary? She nods. I'll stay. If he comes, God help him. We'll destroy him together. Electra keeps moving through the city, trying to find Bullseye, and she stops, turning as a voice reaches for her. Well, okay then, Spidey says as he lands nearby. It's you, isn't it, Electra? Spidey asks, pulling out a bottle of water, and she nods, holding up her weapons. It's not exactly a secret, she points out, and she begins to tell him that she doesn't have time to talk. But Spider-Man nods, drinking his water as he explains that the entire community is trying to find this killer. I've been crisscrossing for days trying to draw him out. Spidey sits back trying to rest as Electra tells him that she'll find Bullseye. That's what I'm worried about. What is Electra going to do when she finds him? And is it the same thing that Daredevil would do? Spider-Man asks her. Meanwhile, over in the prison, Matt Murdock sits in his solitary cell listening. Solitary confinement is right below the warden's office, away from the rest of the noise of the prison. So Matt listens. He learns. The prisoners aren't dying by accident on work details. It's happening in the prison. The warden is covering it up, and he's sending 4 guards to kill Daredevil right now. Make it look like an accident. He hears the warden snap. and he hears their footsteps in the hallway. He pulls on his mask and he prepares. Daredevil moves into his combat stance as the doors open. Meanwhile, Electra is walking back into her dark apartment with Alice greeting her from the couch, apologizing for running off. You're weak, in your own way. Electra begins sitting next to the girl. And so am I, in ways that you are not. Everyone is a collection of strengths and weaknesses. I thought it was simple, that my path was for you as well. I'm coming to realize that trying to force a path on you might not be the right way. Alice tells her that she came back to help, that she's been pinpointing Bullseye's attacks, and it makes no sense, that he shouldn't be able to move that fast. Her phone pings and Alice's eyes widen. Another shooting, a block away, she says, and Electra moves quickly, ordering the girl to lock the doors. Meanwhile, back in the prison, Matt dodges as the side of the gun goes off. He grabs one of the guards by the wrist, twisting him off balance, kicking another in the head. Stupid. What did he tell you? I'm just a man? That it would be easy? He asks, grabbing a nightstick, kicking another guard out the door. The last remaining guard fumbles for his pistol, but Matt levels a gun at the man's face. I'm Daredevil. I destroy supervillains and you are just regular villains, he snarls, the guard nodding, giving up, but Daredevil quickly ties him up, leaving him in the cell. It's already begun and he has no choice. He begins to move through the prison quickly, finding the door into the basement marked restricted. He slides the keycard through it, opening it with a beep. 2 guards and 2 scientists wait for him. He moves fast, throwing the nightstick to disarm one. We gotta dump the stuff! The scientist shouts, and Matt doesn't have time. He can't let them destroy the evidence. He whirls around, shooting the last guard in the foot before raising the weapon at the scientist. Step away from the controls, he shouts, but the console begins to beep and the scientist stammers about the exhaust pipes, with an explosion ripping through the prison. Electra arrives on the rooftop, looking down, seeing Bullseye standing there. He turns to her with a smile, whirling fast, drawing his pistol and firing. Of course it's you! It's always been you! He shouts with glee, and Electra begins to move quickly, blocking the round with her sai, leaping at him, twisting and attacking, knocking his knife out of his hands as she moves fast, picking it up. She wants to kill him. She can taste it. It's what Electra would do, but not Daredevil. And Bullseye fires off another round that whizzes past her head as she dodges. It's perfect! Killing you dressed as him! It's like roleplay murder, he shouts, but she turns, stabbing him in the leg. You can't stop me! I know what I have to do. He shouts at her, so she grips the knife, moving forward and knowing what she has to do. But a voice from behind makes her pause. You heard the man! You can't stop me. Another Bullseye tells her from behind, stabbing her in the back. And she turns to see 3 Bullseyes. It was 4 weeks ago that Bullseye broke free. Fisk wanting the doctors of Ravenloft to allow him to control Bullseye, to make his mind more compliant. But they decided that cloning him and teaching the new minds was easier than fixing Bullseye. From his cloning tank, Bullseye heard all of their plans to clone him over and over, and he reached down, gently cutting himself with his fingernail. The doctor suddenly turned, seeing his tank growing red. They deactivated the machine, lowering him, allowing the liquid to pour out, and as the doctor reached to check Bullseye's vitals, he reached up, snapping that doctor's neck. He rolled out of the machine, pulling the pens from the front doctor's pocket, ripping his breather off. Last thing I want to be is a pain in the ass, but would one of you mind telling me what is going on? He gasps at them, his mouth twisting into a smile, and that is how Bullseye broke free, but back with Electra. Bullseye pulls the knife out of her back, pain rippling through her body. She could take one of them, maybe 2 at close range, but the third is on a nearby roof with a rifle in his hand. She reaches into her belt, pulling out 2 smoke pellets. These bastards aren't killing me today, she thinks to herself, throwing the distraction, allowing the smoke to fill the area, and she moves fast, using her sai to knock down one of them, but a knife slashes through her as the other Bullseye attacks wildly. She grabs him by the neck with a round piercing his shoulder, and they tumble off the roof, falling to a car below, slamming into it. Electra rolls clear as more rounds rain down upon her, with Bullseye firing wildly. She grabs the other Bullseye's pistol, questioning how she's going to fight them off with their silencers, as another round ricochets into her shoulder. And it's then that she realizes what she has to do, pulling the silencer off the pistol, firing it wildly into the air, emptying the weapon. She's beginning to grow dizzy from the blood loss, twisting and falling to the ground when she looks up, seeing the shadows of Iron Man and Spider-Man getting close. You're not killing me today, she whispers with a smile, her world going black. Meanwhile, back in his darkened headquarters as Hell's Kitchen's new boss, Butch hangs up the phone with Izzy Libris, the Kingpin, and Mike stands nearby asking how their plans are moving along. But Butch shakes his head again, explaining that their idea is to use Izzy's remaining son as leverage, and it won't work, as the guy has now left the city. But don't worry, I could think of something, Butch tells Mike, and they both stop talking as they glance at the TV where the news is reporting that Daredevil has taken over the prison. Over at the prison, the police are now surrounding the place with the captain in charge speaking with Cole North, telling him that it's a hostage in a biohazard scene, as the strange gas has now been leaking into the prison. You've dealt with him before. Any idea what Daredevil might be wanting? Wish I knew what was going through his mind on a good day, Captain. Cole tells him with a shake of his head, but they're interrupted as a car comes speeding up and Kirsten McDuffie steps out. Has anyone talked to my client? She demands, and a cop comes over with a phone telling them that it's Daredevil on the line. The captain takes it, demanding to know if everyone is safe inside, but he stops as he hears the voice and he looks up in shock. He, hung up. All he said is, I know he's here. I can hear his heartbeat. Send Cole North alone. So Cole pulls on his suit jacket. I'm going in. Meanwhile, back with Electra, she sits up, still dizzy from her fight with the Bullseye clones. On the table, she looks around at the workshop around her, and Tony Stark tells her that she's in good hands. She asks if she managed to stop Bullseye, but he explains that Spider-Man is currently tracking him, whilst Tony Stark has brought her to his shop to fix her. You should have gone with them while Spider-Man tended to me. I assume your armor can track people. Spider-Man is a lot of things, but he's not a healer. We weren't going to let you die out there, Iron Man tells her as she struggles up, but Tony tells her to sit back down and let his nanomachines continue to work. Look, I don't really know you, but I do know the way to Tony Stark's heart is to ask for an upgrade. Make me a bullseye-killing machine, Electra says to him, holding out her weapons, and Tony cocks an eyebrow and she smiles. Figuratively, of course. Meanwhile, Detective Cole steps into the prison looking at the destruction through his gas mask. He keeps moving, seeing several guards tied up, and as he moves into the main cell block, a prisoner tries to push him along, threatening him. But Cole whirls on him, punching him in the throat. I forgot to warn him that he was escorting Cole North, the big bad detective who took down the Daredevil. Care to try again? Matt Murdock calls to him, and as Cole steps into the main prison, he sees Daredevil sitting on the throne from the warden's office. It's good to see you, Cole, Daredevil says, looking down on the officer from his throne within the prison. Cole demands to know what Daredevil is doing, and the vigilante throws down a folder to him. The FBI was wrong, Cole. The warden wasn't killing them off books for labor duties. He was killing them by making them into lab rats, he explains, telling Cole that the warden was testing experimental drugs on the inmates, designed to make them more violent and antisocial, that they would take with them back to the world, spread it amongst more criminals to bolster the prison system. It's all about the money, Daredevil shouts, anger filling his voice, echoing throughout the prison. Cole reads the file quickly, agreeing that the system is wrong, but it's better than what Daredevil is doing right now. I know you're infected by this, Resid. I know this isn't you doing this, Cole says, and Daredevil nods, agreeing, but he explains that he's angry and leaps down to Cole. I'm gonna burn it all down. You with me? He asks, holding out his hand, but Cole shakes his head, trying to remind Daredevil that he is just sick right now. I need you to come with me so that I can get you some help, Cole tries to tell him, but Daredevil lashes out, knocking Cole to the ground. You want me to come with you? Make me! He snaps. Meanwhile, over in the city, Electra is watching the news as she pulls on her costume, aware that she isn't even fully healed yet. Even with the help of Stark's nanotech, she has no choice. She once again heads into the city, and at his penthouse, Fisk is angry, shouting at Wesley as Typhoid Mary has gone missing once again, despite his wishes. He whirls around on his assistant, demanding that he find her. I want her back for one reason: to fire her, to face her. He snarls, and Wesley nods, heading out of the room. Daredevil ducks Cole's first blow, hammering him hard in the ribs, but his next attack misses, and Cole slams him in the ribs and the jaw. Daredevil whirls around, kicking the cop hard in the face, knocking him down, and Cole moves to his feet, roaring in anger, launching himself at Daredevil. He rains blows down on him, demanding him to stop his morality tour. You need to stop this while Bullseye's out there murdering the city. It's those words that make Daredevil pause, and his eyes widen in shock. Bullseye? He gasps, but the fight is interrupted as gas canisters begin to bounce around the prison as the cops move in. The prisoners all beginning to cough, and Cole struggles to his feet. But Daredevil knocks him out, picking up Cole's fallen gas mask, grabbing a nightstick. As the SWAT begins to move in, Daredevil knows what he must do. There isn't much that would derail him when he sets himself on a path. But you, Bullseye, I'm coming for you. Matt thinks to himself as he rushes the SWAT officers, the nightstick slamming down into them as he leaps into the attack. Meanwhile, Electra is moving through the dark city streets quietly, and she finally arrives in Times Square, activating the piece of tech that Tony gave her. The screens and the billboards of Times Square flash on, showing images of her waiting. Come, try and kill me, she thinks, glaring into the darkness of the night. Meanwhile, back at the prison, Kirsten is still demanding to know what is going on, with the officers ordering her to get into her car and leave the scene. She reaches for her car door, grabbing the phone and calling into Foggy, but as she closes the door, she looks in the back seat and sees Daredevil. He quickly fills her in on everything, telling her about the drug and how it's affecting him. I need your help, Kirsten. I need you to drive me to Manhattan. I need to save the city. Meanwhile, Electra turns, seeing all of the Bullseye clones approaching her, surrounded by scared-looking hostages, and she draws her sighs, but a voice calls out from behind her. Lady Daredevil, looks like you and I had the same idea, Mary says as she stalks forward, her swords in her hand, and Electra nods at her, the two standing side by side, preparing to fight Bullseye. Bullseye looks at the two women, smiling broadly. I'm in heaven! 2 Daredevils to kill! He shouts gleefully, looking at Mary, asking her name. Mary, now burn. She hisses at him, fire beginning to erupt around him, but Bullseye shakes his head, raising the pistol. Stupid! Bringing sparklers to a gunfight! He tells her. The fires erupt larger, blowing up several cars, and Electra moves fast, throwing her Stark Tech sign to knock the pistol out of Bullseye's hand. Mary moves in, stabbing another through the shoulder, and the two women move in, with Electra dealing with 2 Bullseyes while Mary deals with one of her own. But Electra isn't fast enough, with one of the Bullseyes slashing her across the arm. But she blocks another blow, kicking the other away. Mary slams her Bullseye into a car, preparing to make the killing blow, but as she moves in, that Bullseye leans forward, telling her a secret. There's another Bullseye, he whispers, and Electra meanwhile is continuing her fight, yelling for the hostages to run, but Bullseye laughs as he blocks another attack, telling her that 2 hostages seem to be missing. The 2 Bullseyes turn to run, heading off into the shadows, but Electra pauses, knowing that she shouldn't follow them. As she looks around, she realizes that Mary has now disappeared, following the 2 villains, finally tracking them to a nearby theater. She readies her weapons inside, but the lights come on to show 2 people dressed as Electra and Bullseye, tears in their eyes as they're forced to hold a sigh at each other's stomach. Welcome to my new production. This is the end of your life. Bullseye laughs at her, and he explains that his 2 clones are hiding in the rafters, prepared to shoot unless the hostages reenact the scene where Bullseye stabbed Electra. What is this, Bullseye? You're a psychopath, but you've never been off your rocker, Electra asks him, and Bullseye nods, pulling off his mask to reveal his scar, to reveal that he is the original. He explains that he had become too predictable, and that is why he was always beaten by Daredevil. But he had the doctors mess with his brain, make him less predictable, less stable. No predicting my moves now! But Electra stops listening, activating her Stark Tech mask, banging her sides together, sending out a sonar signal. The mask allows her to see the other 2 Bullseyes, see where they are, just like Matt does. No! The hostage dressed as Electra shouts, slamming into the assassin, knocking his shot wide and allowing Electra to slam into him. The 2 trade blows back and forth, but Bullseye kicks her hard in the head. You're dead! He shouts angrily, but Electra mocks him, pointing out that he isn't the greatest marksman anymore. Now he shares that title with others. You couldn't even kill me yourself, she snaps at him. Bullseyes, do me a favor. Kill each other. He shouts, and gunfire erupts upstairs as both of those Bullseyes kill each other, distracting Electra long enough for Bullseye to make a run for it. She picks up his pistol and follows after him, chasing him into the streets, and he stops, turning on her, raising his own pistol casually. I'll give you the first shot, he shouts to her, so Electra raises her weapon, taking careful aim, but she can't do it. Matt is on her mind. Ah, too slow! He shouts, firing his weapon, ricocheting it off several things before Electra drops, blocking it with her sign, sending it back to Bullseye, piercing his leg. He screams in rage, bringing his weapon up again. But Matt is there, slamming his fist into the assassin. No more! He bellows, slamming Bullseye into the ground, raining blows down upon him. But Electra stops his hand, and he turns, looking at her in shock. And he sees the Daredevil costume. What are you? He begins to question, and she shrugs and smiles. You needed help, but they're interrupted as the police arrive, because now Matt Murdock has finally defeated Bullseye. Matt doesn't argue with the cops, though, raising his hands. Ever the fool, Matt Murdock? Electra whispers to him, and the police rush forward, shouting for Matt to put his hands up, even though they already are. The weapons are aimed at him, but a voice calls out. Excuse me, officers, can I be of assistance? Iron Man asks as he lands, joined by Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. The heroes stand in the way of the police, pointing out that Daredevil is the hero who just saved the city. He stopped Bullseye, and he stopped the prison's drug ring. What have you done? Spider-Man asks the cops. At his penthouse, the last Bullseye is rushing up behind Fisk, the mayor turning quicker than he should be able to, taking a knife wound in the shoulder. Mary bursts through the door, screaming in rage, her twin blades piercing Bullseye's chest, and her momentum taking them both through the window. As Bullseye plummets towards the city below, Fisk moves fast, grabbing Mary by the arm, pulling her back in, with Mary apologizing for leaving him. I was trying to protect you, she explains, and Fisk nods, telling her that he was scared that he was going to lose her, and he needs her forever. He leans in close, the question caught in his throat. Wilson, yes, I'll marry you, she whispers. Daredevil still has some legal troubles to go through. Electra is still running around in his costume, though. And Fisk, well, he has other plans. So we go 5 weeks later, with Daredevil walking out of the prison wearing street clothes and his mask. Foggy and Kirsten greet him, welcoming him to the outside world once more, and he thanks them for all their hard work, telling him that he's thinking more clearly now than ever. But he turns his head, and Electra is waiting nearby. But I'll have to take that ride, he tells them, walking away. Meanwhile, Wilson, Fisk, and Mary's wedding is fast approaching. Mary isn't happy about picking out the various foods for the reception, but Fisk explains that having a large wedding will look good for his re-election. Wesley interrupts their tender moment as he tells Mary that she is scheduled for a dress fitting. If it's white, I'll kill someone, she snaps as she stalks out of the room. Please don't, Wesley calls after her. After she leaves, Wesley hands Fisk his tablet, offering him all of the information that they have on the new boss of Hell's Kitchen, Butch Ferris. Fisk looks at it for a moment, explaining to Wesley that he doesn't trust that this new guy won't go after Izzy Libris. But then his eyes narrow as he studies the information. Outside of the city, Electra and Matt finally stop, and she explains to him that she felt that he needed to refresh, that he needed to get away. She begins to walk down the river, pulling off her clothes as she goes. She explains that she still needs him, but that acting as Daredevil while he was away allowed her to understand him better. I want you to join me because you want to, Matthew. I need your help in facing against the Hand. I need my king, she says, slipping into the water, and he begins to follow her, explaining that he needs to rebuild his life. I need to know, how did you do it? How did you make the world forget that you are Matt Murdock? She asks as she pulls off his mask, and he explains that he used the Purple Man's children, that he let them do a mass hypnosis on the world, that if anyone even looks at information that links him to Daredevil, they will see nothing but a blank piece of paper. But how did you remember? He asks her, stepping into the water, and she pulls him close. It's easy. I died. Out in the city, Matt has now retrieved his costume from his apartment, and he's moving through the night of the city. His senses go off, and he lands at a nearby robbery. You don't want to do this, he tells the young man, and one raises a pistol. But Daredevil moves forward slowly, telling them that he knows that they have their reasons. But that isn't the way to make things better. He reaches out, and he slowly takes the pistol. It's okay. It's not too late, he tells them gently. And the other robber tries to run, but is smacked by a large elastic hand. Young man, Reed says with a nod to the robber. Daredevil reaches down for their score, telling them to go home and hug someone that they love. And he hands the money back to the store owner, walking away. As they move through the city, Reed begins to question Daredevil's new tactics, but Daredevil explains that he's seen that the system doesn't work. Together they land on a rooftop, with Reed explaining that he and the other superheroes stepping in to defend Daredevil has begun a conversation about the leeway that the government gives vigilantes and superheroes. Nobody wants a repeat of the Superhuman Registration Act, Reed tells him, but Daredevil shakes his head, explaining that they need to stop worrying about obstacles and optics. They need to stop worrying about what would make their lives harder and merely worry about doing what's right. Now the next day, Fisk stands in his bedroom staring down at the gathering below, mere hours before his wedding. Daredevil calls to him from the shadows, and Fisk turns to see him sitting in a chair. "Congratulations on your early release. I'm sure you're eager to become a productive member of society," Fisk tells him, and Daredevil nods. "I was talking to a friend last night about doing the right thing no matter what, and then I thought about you," he says, standing, explaining to Fisk that he is sure that he had something to do with Bullseye, but he doesn't know what to do about it. They can repeat this battle over and over again, one getting knocked down and getting back up. "We've both done time, and yet we both go back to who we were afterwards, unchanged," he says quietly, and he moves to the window, explaining to Fisk that he's decided to try a new tactic to stop the mayor. "Maybe the way to stop you is just to let you be happy," he says, leaping out the window, congratulating the man on his way out. The wind whips by the window as Fisk eyes following his memory, the eyes that are upon the wedding. People smile as Mary and Wilson exchange their vows. And outside the city, Izzy meets with Butch in a quiet spot in the forest. No words are exchanged, and Butch raises his pistol. A week later, Fisk is sitting with his new wife in a quiet cabin in the Catskills. She asks him to step away from the office to join her for a romantic evening. "5 more minutes, I swear," he promises as she walks out of the room, and he reaches for another file, staring at the words on the front. Daredevil Identity. He opens it, but frowns, anger flashing in his eyes as he stares at nothing but blank paper.
Now, very soon, we'll be bringing you Devil's Reign over here as well. So make sure you like and subscribe so you can see the continuation to this storyline. And I'll see you next time right here at Comicstorian Full Story.